All right, everybody. Adam and John back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And tonight we got this guy from YouTube, and he was like, when I saw his videos in the our Patreons are saying Tim Gray's a big, Brandon McDonald fan. And I'm like, who the hell is this Brandon McDonald fan? I talked to John, and he's like, oh yeah, Brandon McDonald. And I look, and here is this just handsome guy sitting there with cigars and whiskey, and he's just nerding out about bows. And it's like, I could listen to John talk about this stuff. Like, I don't need to watch somebody else talk about bows and all of these things, And then he goes and he starts talking about business and all of this other stuff. And then I get intrigued because, like I said, I can listen to John talk about bows all the time. Like, it doesn't do anything for me, right? So
it's like your dad talking to you. Like,
yeah. Look at this the specs on the rotary girder thing. Like, you build it over here and I will shoot it, and we'll work on it that way. But so we're talking with Brandon McDonald tonight. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it may come off like a man crush thing, but that's just one of the things. Like, I look at like how people do their videos and stuff like that. And so I want to get your, I've since dove into it, and like, I know your backstory a little bit and kind of how you got into this, but I have more questions. But for anybody who's like just kind of coming into it, or maybe they have the same questions of like, this Brandon McDonald guy, he's the bow guy, right? He bought 5 bows and he, all of these things, right? So what's your story?
I can't get them for free. That was the reason that I had to buy them. Yeah. So just briefly, basically the reason I started the YouTube channel, I got off an elk hunt with my brother-in-law, and we realized that we hadn't taken a single picture the entire time we were out there, or done any video work. And I was like, I have to figure out a way to capture these memories. Like, I want to remember and be able to look back at every hunt that I've done. The best way to do that is to be able to learn how to self-film. And so I said, okay, in order to self-film, I'm going to have to learn how to use cameras. And in order to learn how to use cameras and keep myself accountable, I was like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and I'm going to learn more about bows, about arrows, about broadheads, about everything that there has to do with hunting, with 2 goals. 1 is to learn how to self-film my hunts, and 2, to be able to meet people who probably are going to be able to take me on hunts and take me to places that I wouldn't be able to ever get to on my own. So like, I wouldn't be on this podcast if like nobody would know who I am. So that's one of the reasons that I did it. And it's been super fun. Like that's the other thing, is then when I got started, because as I started kind of accomplishing the goal of learning how to use the camera and learning about lighting and all that kind of stuff, like, just continuing to nerd out about not only just the bows and all that stuff, but then nerding out on cameras. And it's just kind of enriched my life, like taking me on adventures that I wouldn't normally go to, because waking up on a Saturday morning and just laying there in bed and getting on TikTok is a lot easier than being like, today we're going to a waterfall and we're going to go shoot the waterfall. Well, let's go figure it out. So yeah, it's really, the whole thing has just added a lot of like richness to my life. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
And one of the weird parts about that for me, and I have the same struggle, I guess, is like you, from everything that you've done, and as you've gone on with these videos and kind of like opened up and brought more of your like personal life into it, like, you're a successful dude. So it's not like you're like, well, fuck, I got nothing to lose, like, we're going to try this YouTube thing, right? And it's very, like, for anybody that's out there listening that's tried it or like considering it, it's very taxing and time consuming. Even what we do with the podcast is a lot of like time commitment, and there's a lot of things that go into it. So like, I guess in that, is it just that fulfilling? Like, where was that like breaking point of like, this really sucks. Okay. Now
yeah, you know what? That's such a great question, because I feel like a lot of people, and I get messages, on occasion I'll get hateful messages, or I'll get comments of like, you just wanted to be famous. I'm like, yes, I wanted to be famous amongst 35-year-old white men across the country. Absolutely. Great. Like it is, the journey is fulfilling in and of itself for me. So like before getting into doing like video work and editing, I was a musician back in the day. Like I was a music business major in college. So when I graduated from college, I went on the road playing bass for young like female artists for 3 or 4 years after I realized that I didn't want to be poor forever, and then switched over into real estate. I was doing our designs for the new construction houses that we were building. So like I'm right brained. I literally, before I started YouTube, I was sitting in our living room like learning how to sculpt with clay. Sounds just absolutely anti like hunting, and yeah, but so for me it scratches an itch. Like every time I sit down and I put a piece of music in with something that is like way more dramatic than it should be, but the cuts just work and line up, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like I said, it just scratches this itch. So I think for me, like hitting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube was a really satisfying feeling. It was kind of interesting. It took a year or so to hit that 1,000 sub mark, and then in the following year it went from probably 1,000 to like 15,000. So the second year was considerably easier, and the sub gain was way bigger. But it I don't know. Yeah, it's never really even been about sub count. Like I don't have some goal of like I want to hit 100,000 subs. Like it's just, that part's not that important to me. I like learning, and I like filming what I'm learning and putting it out there. And obviously, I'm not an expert. Like I'm just a dude who does some stuff. And yeah, so the YouTube thing just really scratches a creative itch that, as my real estate stuff has gotten bigger and more complicated, and I'm having to focus more on like 30,000 foot elevation stuff where I have to be more of controlling people and moving pieces around. I can't like get in and design our houses, which was such a big thing that I enjoyed doing. And YouTube again just kind of scratches that itch for me.
So it's just like a release then, and it's something,
Yep.
you know, so for us, same thing. Like we had these conversations, like, and that's one of the things I got on my list. But so like these are the conversations that John and I would have, and now we just get to have them with cool people and
Yes.
pick their brains, and like I don't have to take what he says as gospel, right? I can ask.
I'm just a guy in the basement working on bows. I mean, I don't know I just make it up as I go. I mean,
so Adam's the pusher. Adam's the one who says, come sit down in the chair next to me and put the headset on.
Yeah. So like, even tonight I'm like, oh man, I got to do a podcast. I was talking to my wife earlier, but then he sent me a message, Brandon McDonald, like, oh fuck, I'm getting over there.
So John, no, honestly, this is no bullshit. Like John's usually here at like, so I tell you 8:30, right? So John's here at like 8:35. Like we'd be doing like the pre whatever, and he comes in oh yeah, dust off his headset. Like, all right, who we talking to again now? And today he was there, like my daughter's still awake, like all this stuff. He's like, hey, yeah, I'm here. Like, what's going on? Like, so funny. No, but from that side of it, you know, John's garage looks, you know, there's 1,000,000 busted arrows and 100 bows laying around. And if you were to look around the room here, I mean, there's bows on the wall and stacks of packs and all these things. And, you know, how do you deal with like content for the sake of content? Like it's like this real big like dichotomy of things where it's like I should be taking a picture because I was shooting my longbow in the basement, you know, like I was you know, adjusting my pack and doing the gear. And it's like, you know, because what you see is like everybody does this stuff, and it is, you know, quote unquote, to be famous or like whatever. And like you have a YouTube, you have, you know, social media and stuff. And it's like, it gets so taxing. It's like, seems so disingenuous. It's like fake.
Right.
But it's really our life, you know, like,
Yep. No, it's definitely hard to, so like for me, my December got a little crazy. Like, Jocelyn's grandpa died on the 19th. And then I got COVID over Christmas. And then my grandma died on the 28th. So like, and we knew Jocelyn's grandpa was going to die basically all of December. So we were kind of prepping and setting up, like, he's this big patriarch of that side of the family, like huge impact in the community. And so, you know, so I basically was just like, you know what, if I'm not shooting my bow, and Jocelyn would get on me, my wife's Jocelyn, she would be like, you haven't posted anything on Instagram in like a week. And I was like, I don't care. Like that's fine. One of the things that I decided I more than likely wasn't going to do is like, I don't have sponsorships and I don't have, like Bowtech, okay, you didn't make your 3 posts this month, Ava Shockey. And so for me, it's been easier because I can just be like, I'm going to just not post anything if I don't want to. But the bigger, like with you guys on the podcast, like you have sponsors. And if I were to ever, and I'm not saying I won't ever, but if I were to ever have sponsors, then I feel like you take on some responsibility to those sponsors. And you're definitely right, though. It is this like kind of tightrope walk of, now this is my job. And it's funny, actually, I turned, like, music was a thing that I was super passionate about all growing up. And I turned music into a job. And then I hated music because I ended up hating that job. And now, like, I barely play anymore. And I've got a guitar by the couch, and I'll pick it up every once in a while. But I don't want to turn this into a job. Like, I didn't make videos for 2 months. Okay, I didn't make videos for 2 months. And I can do that because I don't have those responsibilities. I haven't turned this into a job. And that's a really big, like, that's a really big thing for me, is making sure that I don't have to turn this into a job if I don't want to.
That was kind of like me, like the last 3 years. I mean, I carried the camera gear and all the stuff, and it got to the point where I'm like, man, it's like kind of not even fun. And so then this year, I'm like, you know what? I didn't even get to hunt much. I was so busy, and I think I hunted like 5 days altogether. But I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to set the camera gear aside for right now, and then just go hunt and focus on the hunt. And, I was like, man, it brought that spark back.
Yes, totally. And it doesn't, for me, it never takes long. Like, I just, I'm editing the video for the Prime Inline 5 right now. And like, I set it up at night, and I've got some smoke going, like I tried to do for the Bowtech video that I released. And it's ridiculous, and it's over the top. And I know, but I'm having fun doing it. Like, and I realize, like, man, I really miss this part of it. Like, certain shots that you're not sure how, when they're looking, you're looking in camera, and then you get them on the computer, and you're like, oh, that's sweet as shit. Like, that looks really cool. So yeah, it's me just taking a break and then coming back. Like, I'm kind of reignited. I'm super excited. I'm watching, bow videos again for what's coming out this year. Like, I'm back into it. But yeah, taking a break definitely kind of helped relight the fire a bit. And then I just have 2 bows that I'm really enjoying shooting right now, like the Bowtech and the Prime are the 2 first bows that have come in this year. And I got them both dialed in real quick. And I'm enjoying standing in my driveway, just pounding arrows down range again.
Yeah, that Bowtech, man, is, so I ended up this year, I went to the Revolt X, which is basically the same thing as the XL, just different cam mod or different cam. Yeah. But I brought it over, like, we shoot our winter leagues, and they started in January. And I literally took my bow from, like, my hunting case and brought it in, and I just brought the arrows. And I shoot, well, actually, I think the first 2 weeks I shot my hunting arrows. And then I was finally like, man, they're going all the way through the bales into the back wall and stuff. So I got to go with my older arrows. And it was literally like 15 minutes, and I had the bow tuned back in, freaking Allen wrench, crank the cam over a little bit, and bullet hole, perfect, where with the PSE, because I have the NTN, the original one.
Yeah.
And man, I actually told Dudley he could have it back when we were up at TAC. He's like, I'll take it.
I heard that story on the podcast. That's great. I'm sure he didn't have his feelings hurt.
No.
Hey, we don't have to nerd out about bows yet, unless that's where we want to go. I don't want to jump the gun and add him to put his headset down and walk off.
No, that's fine. Like that, that's why this works so well for, like, John and I. Like, John, so I say it on here all the time, like, so John might not say a whole lot of stuff, but when John talks, you got to listen. And then when John talks about bows, you're like, all right, this motherfucker, he's in it, like, it's and it like, it's great. I mean, it's an amazing resource, right? So I don't have to go to the bow shop to have anything done, but I also don't have to go to the bow shop and like take with a grain of salt who's telling me about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's great
Yep.
with what you're doing too, is like you have all of these bows and you're going through them. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, like from the bow side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it might be like a marketing thing. It might be like, you know, this is what people are searching for, but like mid-level bows, it seems like most of the bows that you're doing are like all of the like flagship bows. Do you shoot many of the like, you know, budget bows or like the second tier bows?
No. So it's kind of strange actually, with as active of a hunting community as I feel like Tennessee has, Middle Tennessee, we don't have very many shops around here. And so I'm kind of shooting what they're carrying in general, and I'm expanding a little bit. Like I'm going to see if I can fish an Athens out of some other state. But I don't really want to be honest, like it goes back to that enjoyment thing. Like I get a lot of asks for like bear, you know, can you go shoot a bear bow? And I'm not saying that bear is not good and that some of their, you know, higher end stuff's not good, but I don't know. I have limited amount of time. And so what I've kind of decided to do is I've got 2 shops that I like working with here, and they carry certain brands. And then I've been lucky enough to make contact through the Elk Shape guys with, MFJJ out in Washington. And he's been kind enough to send me some stuff this year so that I didn't actually have to buy it if I didn't want to. But I've still purchased, I've still bought 3 bows so far this year here in Tennessee to, kind of support the local shops. But no, the mid-range stuff, I mean, even if you like, let's say I got sent 30 bows and they were all perfectly set up, like you still think about the amount of time that it takes to get an arrow dialed into those bows, to make sure that the bows liking that arrow, and all just the little subtle things to really give it a fair shake. Yeah, I just don't have time. So I would rather say, why is this your flagship? Well, it's the best one that we're making. Okay, cool. I'm going to shoot that one.
Right. And that's kind of Adam and I kind of go, he's like, why do you want that bow? I'm like, well, because I want to shoot the best bow that they make. I don't, if I'm going to shoot it, I'm going to shoot a brand. I want to shoot their best bow. And then I want to shoot all the brand's best bows and see which one. So like even last year before I picked up the Bowtech, I was like dead set on the Matthews. I'm like, man, I want to get the V3. And then I sat at the shop and I shot the V3, and then I shot the Bowtech. And I'm like, man, I really want the Matthews, but the Bowtech just shot better for me. Like, because
it's
33 inches axle to axle.
Thing. Right. That's a tough thing for you, like as a person, to go into a shop with an idea and then to change your mind while you're at the shop. That takes some super open-mindedness. Like, and it also speaks to how much you like the Bowtech compared. Did you shoot the 33-inch Matthews or the 29?
I shot the 31. It was before this was the V3, not the V3X.
This was the true V3. Okay,
yes.
Okay.
And that's when
that you had gotten lazy and left off the X. Okay.
No, so it was the V3. This was last year when the bows come out, and that was the 31 or 31 and a half, whatever. And I'm like, and I think I told Adam, like, man, if the Matthews was a 33-inch axle to axle, then I think it would have settled in my hand a little better, because I'm a 31-inch draw length. I'm 6'3", got a long draw. And I was like, and then all of a sudden, when they released the V3X, I'm like, oh shit, now I got to go get that one.
Yeah, dude, that's the one I've got on order. I'm just chomping at the bit to get that one in. I should have just bought one of the stock colors, but man, I'm super excited for that one. I've always said if Matthews would give me a 33-inch VXR, I would, I talked to one of the guys at Matthews and I was like, please do this, please. And they were like, maybe, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And then it obviously wasn't because of me. They had it in the plan, but I'm right. super, super excited about that bow.
And that's why it's so hard, like for me, because I grew up everything, off the shelf. I mean, my first bow was from like my first hunting bow was a $50 out of the classified ads, and the guy had a whole bunch of them and went and shot them. And I mean, I shot that bow until I think from the time I was 12 years old until 2003. So like, I mean, a long time. And I never killed anything. I shot at a lot of things, but I never killed anything. Like until I married into this family, like, you know, I killed a lot of things with a gun. But it was just, we were just go out and shoot deer, and you shoot your deer, and that's it. You know, that's hunting.
Yep.
And then they were super into bows and bow hunting. And like now here we are. Right.
Of course.
But so John has, and his wife doesn't listen, so it doesn't matter. You know, 3 bows hanging, you know, and, you know, he's hunted maybe one time with that Bowtech just because.
No, actually, I didn't hunt with the Bowtech at all.
Yeah. Yeah. But it wouldn't stop him from like, oh, you know, that, you know, carbon levitate, that shot really good. It's $2,000, but you know, you know, and then he's going to go to the bow shop and start fiddling around with the bow. And the next thing you know, he's going to be like, hey, hold on to these bows. Tell my wife I sold it. And then I need to put a string on it or something.
I hear you.
And it doesn't do anything for me. Like, you know, I have had shot the Carbon Icon at ATA against every other bow, and there was nothing, and this is a couple of years ago, and there was nothing that like jumped out at me from the $600 range to the, you know, $2,000 range. And I think, you know, some of our best feedback podcasts, you know, because, you know, we have a lot of adult onset hunters, we have a lot of guys that are just picking up a bow again. And so if you say, okay, well, you want the new Matthews or new Bowtech, and then you want like, you know, the HHA Tetra sight, or, you know, like that new dialed sight looks really great. You know,
it does look good.
You know, $500 here. And then, you know, Matthews, you talk about Matthews, you know, we had a guy at our club go, and he's coming, getting his Matthews rest set up, and he's got the fucking price tag on it. It's like $280 for basically, you know, just a regular old rest, but it says Matthews on it, and it's the same color scheme and all that stuff. And it's like, you know, so you're $5,000 into this flagship everything. And then you two are going to do this again next year, and maybe twice again this year. And, you know,
it just depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole, though. Like, I mean, it's any hobby. You think about all the ridiculous hobbies that people are into. Like, there are guys who have $50,000 go-karts that they race around tracks, and they obsess over like a new something thing that if they can just get this thing on the go-kart, like it's written into our DNA to try to progress. And so when you point that thing at something like bow hunting or bows in general, it just depends on how, you know, like on how voracious you want to be. One of the number one comment that I get when I'm posting these things is like, I still shoot a Matthews Z series, and it's the best bow. I'll never need anything else, and I've never changed the strings. And I'm like, I understand, and that's awesome. Like, it legitimately, totally cool. That's a great bow. That's not what this is about. I recognize that I don't need all this stuff. I don't need all this stuff, and I don't want people to misunderstand. I'm not making a lot of personal sacrifice to buy 5 bows, especially not now that I've started the Mere Mortal stuff, because those bows are now being given to people for free. Like, that's one of the reasons that we started it, was so that I could justify this kind of ridiculousness, because I recognize that like people could perceive that like, oh my God, I don't have the new bow this year. I'm not going to be able to kill something as well because it's 3 feet per second slower. And it's a very American thing to probably do, to get obsessed with the stuff and to lose contentment with what we have. And like, I do it more with camera gear than I do with bow gear. Like, it's much more, it's an easier decision for me to just be like, you know what, I know these general specs that I like for bows, so here's what I'm going to order, and then I know generally blah 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 blah. But when it comes to camera stuff, I'm on YouTube like all the time, just like, what's the new? Canon just came out with this new R5C because it's the cinema camera, and I feel like my dynamic range in my YouTube videos that I post isn't enough. I need 16 stops of dynamic range versus 12, and like, it's just this stupid it's, you know what, it's not stupid. It's an obsession to be as cutting edge and as good as we can, and it's probably one of the things that drives our country to be to be great. Like the fact that we have this freedom to kind of indulge this part of our DNA. So I don't want to, I don't know, maybe I'm downplaying a little bit because I don't want people to feel bad about not having the latest and greatest thing, but like I like that people are creating the latest and greatest thing. And I think it's good overall that we're trying to do this. We're trying to create as perfect a bow as we can, or as perfect an arrow as we can, as perfect a broadhead as we can. You know, I think it's overall, I think it's a positive thing.
I agree with that. I mean,
Yep. But we have this conversation, like he was saying, like we have this conversation all the time, because like you buy a $1,000 bow and then next year it's a $500 bow, or, you know, whatever, because it's not the latest and greatest. But you can buy a $300 gun and it's still a $300 gun, or in 5 years it's a $350 gun, or you can buy a $5,000 gun and now it's a $10,000 gun. You know, there's a big giant difference between like the appreciation, or archery as an investment is probably not
yeah, but we know that going into this, you know.
For sure. Yeah. And the gun thing is really interesting because the other thing the $350 gun can do is it's going to outshoot 99.99% of archers if you give somebody just a weekend who's never shot a gun. That's the crazy part. I was thinking about this earlier. I was shooting 100 yards with the Bowtech, and I was like, if I had a rifle right now, I could probably freehand a group that was better than the group that I just shot. And like, haven't shot a rifle in a long time, but it is bizarre just the the technology of what a gun is. But obviously the gun thing, it's also an asset because of the freedom that it helps us kind of secure. And we all, you know, as much fun as it was to watch dude on Walking Dead shoot zombies in the head with a crossbow, we all know that if the shit hits the fan, a bow is not going to be the best the best tool to protect the homestead.
Right.
Until that rate limiting step of ammunition runs out.
Yeah. I mean, they'll figure something out at that.
And we got
point,
some
I'm
heavy
sure.
sticks, but so you, funny thing you would say that, right? So you're I hadn't seen the video prior to ATA about the axis deer, right? And so we walk up and we're talking with Troy being the ranch fairy, and John's like, yeah, the hunt with Brandon, you know, and so I want to hear it like from your side, because I heard it like from Troy, and I've seen your video and you know your explanations of it, but you know there's not many people. Well, John's done it, I think, fling some arrows out at animals at 100 yards.
Yeah, I might have flung one or two.
John just shamefully put his head down a little bit. There was a little bit of a
antelope.
You got to with those little bastards. Oh man, I have a hate relationship. There's no love for antelope right now.
Yeah, I had a knee full of freaking cactus pickers, and 60 yards they looked at me like, oh hey, and then they went out to 100. I'm like, well, screw it, I'm sending it.
Dude, you got lucky. Where we went, I went with Earl with Cutter Stabilizers this year. We went to Southern Colorado, and you'd get to 1,000 yards, and I'm not exaggerating, and they would stand up and look like, what are you? And then we'd sit there for 20 minutes and they would just sit there staring at you. It was ridiculous. Had better luck in South Dakota getting closer to antelope. But so the axis deer, this is an interesting, like, I mean, because I'm making YouTube videos on the hunts, I'm probably doing things and then posting them and learning as I'm going about, like, is that a shot that I want to make again? Like, do I want to make a 110-yard shot on an animal, especially an animal the size of an axis? And I'm gonna just be super honest, because I feel like that's kind of what I, like, why not? I don't guess I have a lot to lose. Knowing the circumstances that I was in, we were in a high fence ranch, and knowing that they had tracking dogs, knowing where we were on the hunt, and then knowing how I felt under those circumstances with where the animal was, I was very willing to let that shot down. And it doesn't look like long in the video. Like I look shaky, which is kind of honestly my typical like shaky shot. But at the very last moment, there's this, maybe half a second, quarter of a second where everything steadies up. And then I go, my pin's exactly where I want it to be right now. And then finish pulling through the shot and the arrow goes. And is that a shot that I would take again at this point, knowing I just don't know. I don't want to say no, but like if no one knows and nobody sees it, then it's very easy to be like, dude, just fling an arrow at that antelope. It's 100 yards away. You shoot 100 yards. Like you have the potential to hit it, but then being like, well, you're going to post this for thousands of people to look at and to judge you. So, and there are, I think, some like, is it ethical to do it? And I think it's in the gray for me, to be honest. Like, I think under those circumstances, I was willing to do it for all those reasons. And maybe that's not the best, but maybe I'm continuing to progress as a hunter and continuing to progress as someone who's willing to make mistakes in public. Although I wouldn't say it was a mistake. I just think that it was kind of gray. And I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do in that circumstance again now. I just don't know. I mean, I shot my elk at 85 and felt absolutely super solid under the circumstances. Like we'd watch the elk for 10 minutes. I was calm. I was on my knees. I was super, like my body position was great. I drew. It was the same kind of thing where I was like, if this is not settling, I'll just let down and then let the arrow rip. And, elk died in 60 yards. So I don't know. It's a tough one. Like I know Josh Bomar gets a ton of crap for shooting animals at really, at really long distances. And I don't know. I also wonder, like, is there a lot of guys that are, that are shooting whitetails at 30 yards max, and then they're just like, there's no way in hell you can shoot out to 100 and ethically shoot out to 100. And I think what we're getting into is animal behavior a little bit at that distance. Like the axis, when I did the breakdown video, if you haven't watched the breakdown video, it's crazy to watch how much this thing reacts as he hears the arrow incoming, because he definitely didn't care about the bow. The sound of the bow from 110 yards sounded like a stick breaking to him. But when he hears that arrow go in, he just does this crazy dip dive roll thing. And what that means is that I probably got a little bit lucky with arrow contact, because my shot probably would have hit low had he just perfectly stood still. But where it ended up hitting him, it was a very fatal shot, liver, and then out one of its lungs, as he kind of did this roll thing. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what this year holds. I would prefer to be like, I like what Aaron Snyder says, where he talks about, being good enough to get within 40 yards of everything so that he's not having to take those long shots. And I think that for me, that's probably the next step. The opportunities for me to go out and hunt are far fewer because I'm in Tennessee throughout the year. And I wish I could commit more time with it, but with what I do, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Like all those things kind of added up to me in the moment for the long shot on the axis to just be like, yes, given all the factors and circumstances, let's cut one loose. Here we go.
Right. And you recovered it.
Oh yeah. No, and it was the best meat I've ever had, and I'm super glad that I did, because I think that with where we were in the hunt, the next step was me either picking up a rifle or going home empty.
Right.
So, and obviously, if we were tribesmen back in the day hunting because we absolutely had to for meat, that's a shot I'm 100% of the time going to take given the circumstances. 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So on the where you're on the fence with it now, versus obviously in the moment everything lined up and you're like, okay, this is going to be great. I feel completely confident I'm going to send this. You recover the animal, eat it, all this stuff. You post the video. Like, is this like introspection coming from like your own like thought process looking back on it, or is it from like backlash and then like weighing
Sure.
out everybody else's opinion?
Yeah, no, I think the majority of it is my thought process and really analyzing what the deer did when I was doing that part of the video. Because when I was doing the initial hunt video, you know, I slowed it down a fair amount so you could kind of see what was happening with the deer. But when I did the analyzing part, I could see the arrow actually dropping in and then watch how much the animal was reacting to the sound of the arrow. So like that's a thing that I can't, that's a factor that I can't control. And so I feel like I'm taking more of a risk at that distance than, and so I think editing that video was one of those things where I was like, man, maybe this isn't the best idea. But you know, like one of my first hunts that I did for black buck, the first hunt that I did for black buck, the only shot we got on those, because they're just like antelope, they're just, it's really difficult to get close, and they were rutting, so they weren't coming to any of the feeders. Was a 100-yard shot, and they still stood stick still until the arrow hit the ground because there was a little bit of wind. And if he would have dropped, he would have been toast, because I just skinned the hair off of his belly, you know. And so that was probably one of those reasons where when I took that shot, I was like, well, I mean, you've taken a 100-yard shot on an animal before. And, you know, like this year, I took a 40-yard shot on a whitetail down in Oklahoma, a doe, and nailed her, but I hit her far enough forward that I wasn't able to recover her. It was obvious to me. I was watching blood pour out of her as she was running off, like I could see it. And then she ran to 80 yards to the edge of the woods, stood there for a while and bled, and then stopped up and walked off where I couldn't find her. And what I know based on, you know, doing that is I probably hit her forward in that dead zone that's ahead of everything. And there's a chance that I nicked something and she was bleeding inside, or there's a chance that she just made it to, you know, across the pasture where we couldn't see into the next bank of woods, and I never found her. And it started snowing that night, so I wasn't able to track well. So like I didn't recover a deer at 40 yards, but I did recover a deer at 110. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think about this stuff a lot. Like I think about not necessarily the ethics, but just the boundaries of my limitations and then what the animal is going to do. And I don't know that there's ever going to be like, I don't know that there's ever going to be a time where everything just perfectly aligns and you can get rid of all the variables, because I think that there's still, I mean, how many guys have misshot a deer at 20 yards? Like almost everyone.
I did it this year.
Almost everyone.
I mean,
well, but that's what I'm saying is like, I know we're, to be totally honest, we're using a less lethal weapon to kill these things. And because it scratches some itch in us, the intimacy of having a deer close to you, of being able to see all the detail of it, and then being willing to basically stab it to death. You know, that's what we're doing.
mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with it, you know, like I'm okay with that. But if we were really talking about like, you know, full 100% absolutely ethical, you'd be sitting there with a very large gun that was going to blow a hole big enough in the deer from every distance, and you'd probably never shoot over, you know, I don't know, 50 yards, whatever. So when it comes to like thinking about the ethics of what we're doing, we have all accepted the terms of this relationship that we have with archery and with animals.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're shooting, it's not like we're shooting foam that's not going to react. Every animal is going to react. I mean, like I said, less than 20 yards, they're still going to do the same thing. You know, they're going to, you know, come in, they're going to drop, they're going to turn away. Look at the pigs that, you know, the ranch fairy shoots. You know, he does videos on all the breakdown that 9 yards, 14 yards, you can still see them rolling away. You know, it's just every scenario is different. So
but the results are the same, that every year we fill up our freezers and we feed our families. And it, to me, it's an acceptable, the terms are acceptable of what we have decided to do. Like it just is. I think there's a lot of, like 100 years ago, there would just be no question. Like it would just be like, yeah, of course, this is what we do. But for some, not for some reason, the more modern we get as people and the more cityfied we get, there's more people that are like, I can't believe you do that. I can't believe it.
Right.
And you know, fuck those people.
As they're going to McDonald's and buying the burgers from, you know, a slaughterhouse.
Well, and you know, we have that conversation often, right? Like, and one of the things that we haven't talked about, I don't even think I've talked to John about it, is, you know, there's all of this like infighting, right, amongst hunters and everything. And so we talk about, like, as we go further and become more cityfied, right? And we talked earlier about, like, this is just the way that we live our lives. I mean, so at my daughter was 3 years old. One of my friends was going to the store, comes back, there's a dead deer that got hit in the time frame, you know, unprompted. Yep. My daughter goes with him, comes back, and she'd seen us clean deer and stuff before. And my wife asked her, what'd you think of that? It was her first time like seeing him like cut meat from an animal, you know, on the side of the road, you know. I mean,
yeah,
it's just something that we do, but it's just, you know,
sure.
3-year-old. And my daughter looks at my wife and she says, I just wish they would have let me carry the meat back. Like, wow. that, I mean, and that's, you know, and so when you talk about like that cityfied, like this is just the way that we live our lives, right? And this hunter infighting, like what I'm getting at here is like, I didn't realize, like when I was coming up hunting, and really until I started like entered into this space, that there was a difference between like public land hunting and private land hunting. Like I just thought it was hunting. Oh, you hunt on your parents' property, and oh, you hunt over there. But now everything has to be like, oh, well, I only hunt public. And for the amount of people that we talk to, like at these shows and at this stuff, where that becomes like a big deal, like especially like when we're talking about saddle type stuff. Like if you talk to somebody who hunts, and, you know, especially like younger guys, like, yeah, you know, I'm really trying to get out on public, you know, I've been hunting my farm, you know, and all this stuff. And like, but I'm going to try and hunt some more public. Like, do we make it sound like it's that cool, or like that it's better?
I mean,
or
imagine, I feel like the biggest, like killing a 7x7 elk on public land, where, you know, that is 100% an incredible accomplishment, versus me going to a high fence ranch and being like, hey, what elk size do you guys have in right now? And they go, oh, we've got a 7x7. And I go, great, I'll be there on Friday. And here's the food that I would like. And what kind of sheets do you have on the bed? And can you set the AC to 70? You know, like there is no doubt that it's, and this is, again, just like we've been talking about, like the human nature of, you have created something that is the most difficult. The most difficult thing to do is a public land hunt for a monster, whatever. See, but there's like, it'd be interesting to be like, you know what's actually even harder? You should go hunt elk in Louisiana. Like, that's the ultimate. Because, dude, let me tell you, if you can accomplish that goal of an elk in Louisiana, like, holy crap. So there is a line where it becomes absurd. And to me, some of the places that I've hunted that were public, I was like, oh, this is absurd. Like, this in and of itself right here, the amount of people versus the amount of animals that are here, this is absurd. And for me, coming from Tennessee, this is a giant ass waste of my time. And the amount of effort and the amount of money and the amount of time that it has taken me to prep to do this, I'm hunting elk in Louisiana. So when people give me crap for like hunting high fence, I say, this is not, I don't take the same joy out of shooting the axis that I did as shooting the elk that I did, which the elk was on public land. I purchased a tag for that through the landowner program. The tag was extremely expensive. Most people aren't going to be able to do that. That's just where I am in my hunting journey and my life journey. Like, yeah, I get it. Like, people give Joe Rogan shit because he shows up in California or in Utah at these really, really specialized places. But do you think that Joe Rogan is going to go to an over-the-counter DIY place and take his time to go do that? The answer is no. And all the people that are doing DIY over the counter, if I said, hey man, I will give you this type of hunt, here's what it is and here's where it is, I think they would be extremely tempted to be like, yeah, I do want to do that. Because I want to go to California and I want to hunt the Tejon Ranch. Of course I do.
Yeah, I'm in.
So yeah. So, but I think that there's a lot of, but there's nothing like hunting over the counter DIY on public land is sifting for gold in a place where many men have sifted for gold before, and finding the nugget there, being a better hunter or being right place, right time. There is something that is super, super special about that. And I fully acknowledge that feeling. I fully acknowledge that. But that's why I said, like, me going out and shooting something on private probably feels less special than that. And then me going and shooting something high fence feels less special than that. You know, when I go high fence, it's because I want to try axis meat. And so but I would prefer to also go have a cool experience with Troy the Ranch Fairy and with Sarah Gamache and like do that adventure grocery shopping. That was why I called that video that.
Right.
Well, so and I think Troy told us when he was telling us, like it was like the second biggest ranch in Texas. So when you say like that's a high fence ranch, it's not like, you know, in a backyard of somebody. Right. Like
no,
it was.
No, I mean and it was right after the Texas freeze where they had lost the vast majority of the axis deer and the black buck that were on the property. So the pickings were super slim. You know, and yeah. I'd be curious to know what Troy's side of the story was. Like, we talked, you know, we did an interview while we were down there. It'd just be interesting to see how he recollects everything and how he's telling the story now.
What was fun? I mean, so John was there, like for like what I recall, you know, he was like, oh yeah, you know, and he's like, we were leaving or like going to the airport or something or going to town, and we drove and there was these axis that were out there and they were like way out there, but these are animals that were not like on a pattern anymore. So it was like, this is this huge ranch and they weren't going to feeders, they weren't going to this, and they were right there. So we turned around and we went and got our stuff and we got out and we stalked closer and closer and closer. And then he's like, all right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and they're going to run over by you. And they ran like the opposite way or something. So then you had to stalk like a bunch further. And then he's like, and then all of a sudden it was like, we weren't getting any closer. And I look up and he's like, at full draw. Whoa, 110, huh? He's going to send it. Okay. Get the camera up.
Well, I mean, I mean that's roughly what was happening. I guess
this is third hand, roughly. Right? So this is a game of telephone.
That's good enough. I mean, yeah, Troy was on camera there. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the fences play a role, and the feeders play a role, and the watering holes play a role in how those animals are living. But yeah, I mean, it's a 3,000 acre ranch, and the fences were done way back when, pre this guy buying it, and the pastures were huge. There were spots where you could walk for a long ways and not actually see a fence. So I mean, it feels super open. But I mean, I don't want animals to be abused. I don't want them to be thrown, you know, for 100 animals to be thrown in a 5 acre, you know, little section like we do with cattle when we're bringing them to the slaughterhouse, and then for guys to be like, hell yeah, I shot a 250-inch whitetail this year. Like, that seems disingenuous to me. But like my axis that's on the wall, when people ask me like, wow, what is that? I say, I was at a high fence ranch in Texas and here's who I was with, and would you like to try a piece of axis meat? It's awesome. You know, I'm not acting like I went and got the thing in, you know, Hawaii.
Yeah, like, so that's one of the things, like just the whole like high fence or like outfitter or like everything type conversation. So like for yourself, you know, you have, again, for you, like with the high end bow videos with you know, you have a video that says, you know, how I justify or whatever, where I got my money for $75,000 in hunts this year. Right.
Sure.
Is like almost the antithesis of like what the conversations that we have, generally speaking. Right.
Yeah.
Because, I think even like you yourself would say that's not out of, you know, that's out of most people's realm of like what they do, unless you're these guys that are chasing a slam or like doing
Right.
some of this stuff. But then
those guys that are chasing the slam, though, that's interesting because you can't just decide to go chase the slam unless you have some resources and some time to go do that.
Mhm.
So like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. But you are correct. And honestly, I know that some of this stuff, like especially the finance stuff, is going to turn a lot of people off.
Well,
And
what I wanted to say
plenty of-
about that was
Yeah.
like in like one of your other videos, and I'm not sure which one it was, you were sitting down and you were kind of talking about like the real estate side. I think it was like your second or maybe third real estate video that you were doing. And it was talking, you used an analogy about hunting, and you were saying, you know, it's like going on a hunt where somebody's already scouted it out for you and they've already done this. And, you know, so that was something that struck me as like, you know, in business. And I think that you approach a lot of things from like a business standpoint, and you had mentioned it with like Joe Rogan. It's somewhat of like a return on investment. And like, I say this a lot in a lot of things that I do at work, and like in trying to, I don't want to say like motivate people or whatever, but maybe like empower people by saying like, what is your time worth? Right.
Yeah.
And so like, if you have more money than time, it might be more beneficial for you to focus your time. Like you said, it's not worth your time to go where there's a million hunters and you're sifting for that one piece of gold. But if you have more time than money, then DIY the shit out of everything and give it a whirl.
And when,
right?
and when I was, you know, when I was 23, 24, 25, just graduated college, like I was making 25 grand a year playing music. But when we were gone on weekends, I had lots of time during the week, and I would have, you know, grabbed my original Browning compound bow that I had, where I bow hunting, and that's what I would have gone out with, and I would have gone DIY public land, you know, for whitetail here in Tennessee, and I would have, you know, scrounged up enough money to figure out a blind, and that's great. Like that's where I was then. And then I decided to start making changes in my life because I said, I don't necessarily want to do this way forever. And I started making those changes where I mean, I gave up a career in music, which was a thing. Like, I loved music. And I said, I believe that I will never get to the point of financial security that I want to doing this job. And I wonder how many people have really thought about that. Like, are you in a job that will allow you to achieve the level of financial security that you really want? Like, I think about the episodes of The Office with Steve Carell as Michael Scott, and he would talk about like being a multimillionaire when he retired. And you know, it was obviously a joke because of what he was doing, and everyone knew that he was not making changes and making the steps in his life to actually get to that point. And it was literally like a joke. But I wonder how many people in their minds are thinking, I'm going to retire and it's going to be great. And you're like, okay, tell me what you're doing to get there. Tell me what you're doing to get to that point, and I will tell you whether you're on the right trajectory or not. And so when I started making those incremental small changes, it was both the easiest thing ever and the hardest thing ever. Once you figure out how to buy a house and how to fix a house and how to rent a house, then you know how to do it. and then you just go do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. And there's little variances that happen within it, but generally, once you've figured it out and once you've learned, you know how to do it, and then you can just go do it again. So it's both easy and hard. Yeah.
What I think is so amazing about like what you just laid out right there, and it affects a lot of people on like a lot of different levels as far as like just even talking about careers and stuff. But I would say that I could like make a TikTok of this and overdub like a couple of words and say, once you figure out how to kill big deer, then you know how to kill big deer. And then you just do it again and again and again. And what changes are you making incrementally to
achieve that?
And that's one of the things that we deal with our listeners like quite a bit. Like guys that my brother-in-law is a great example, is like he can recite to you like everything that Dan Infalt's ever said or what the hunting public does or like whatever, but you can't get him out of bed or in the woods or anything. Like it's like there's this giant disconnect of like, I know exactly what to do, but
he's not willing to change that little thing.
It's that one little step. And then there's so many people that like obsess about their gear or like the ranch fairy, like get your arrows right, or like I can't get this nock tuned, or like my camo doesn't match, or like I don't have all the stuff for my saddle. But it's like, what are you doing to like, how much time are you spending in the woods like looking for these deer, or are you know what I mean? And it's
yes, you're absolutely right.
And it's the entire part of your life. So whether it's finances or weight loss or like whatever, it is those incremental changes. And once you know how to do it and you commit to making those changes, then it's, it's certainly doable. Right.
Yeah. Well, and so much of the stuff is truly, it's relatively simple, but it's very hard at the same time. So like weight is an issue for me. Like that's one of those things that I struggle. My wife she works out every day. She's very petite. She's very picky about what she eats. And I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I want carbs and sugar and fat. I want all of it. I want 2,000 calories. I want pancakes and sausage. I want all the stuff. And so that's a struggle for me. And it's very simple. Don't eat breakfast. Don't eat shit for lunch. Don't eat shit for dinner. And that's it. That's very simple, but it's very hard to do. It's really strange. So, and it's the same thing with so many things in life, but there's these, the human, the human brain just does, I don't know. Yeah.
So one of the things that, we'll get to it like at the end. John always wants to know, like, what's your bow setup? But like one of the things I've been thinking about asking people, because like, I think it's really awesome to like figure out where people have come from. Right. And you had just mentioned it. Like, I want to ask people what their first bow setup was, like your first real hunting setup. And for you being like archery nerd of nerds, like, were you always that way? Like, so back in the Browning days.
No, I wasn't. And that's the thing, back in the Browning days, like my dad bought me the Browning compound bow when I was in high school. And I just wanted to backyard shoot, and I wanted to, just kind of learn some of the stuff about compound bows. And now knowing what I know, I'm just like, oh my gosh, how did you ever even hit anything remotely with this thing? Like knowing what I know now. And, but then I hung it up for a while, and I would rifle hunt. So my kind of extended family's down in West Texas and then down in Arkansas. And so when we would leave Colorado, which was where I was born, when we would leave Colorado for our, twice a year vacation, once to see Mama and Granddad, and then once to see Nana and Papa, we would go hunt stuff in those different places, birds in Arkansas, and then birds and deer down in Texas. And so I had it like the hunting thing was always something that was like, this is awesome. Like, this is super cool. And then when I bought this place, we have 25 acres here in Nashville 10 years ago, that was when I really was like, okay, I want to get back into something with archery, like that kind of thing. So I picked up the Browning bow again, and I started, kind of farting around, shooting a bag target, getting ready. And then we had a tenant move out, and he offered to trade me a 10-point crossbow for if he could take the stove and the fridge. And I was like, that could be cool. Let's do it. So I traded him this, he gave us the 10-point crossbow, and I started kind of getting that dialed in a little bit. And when I say dialed in, I was just making sure that the little dots on the scope, were good. And I literally had trees that I spray painted with what dot I should use if the deer was standing there. And killed my first doe. I killed 2 does that year actually with it. And then I was hooked after that. Then I went in, then I went down to the archery den in Tennessee and bought 1 bow that year, and then 2 bows the next, and then just, started kind of going from there. But yeah, I think my first, probably the Browning was my first one, but I think my first really good bow was, I guess it was the Halon 32 was probably my first bow that I consider really good. I had 2 in between the Browning and all that stuff, and they were major brands, but
that's more fun. Like the Browning stuff, like what arrows were you shooting with the Browning, and what broadheads, and like what sight and what rest, like that.
Yeah,
so that's the fun stuff.
Right. So that one, oh man, the arrows on that, I still have it. Like I'm looking over at it. That's why I'm looking at it, and I'll never get rid of it. Like it's just one of those memories. They were older school aluminum arrows that had like the traditional Easton FMJ just did like a throwback arrow to them. They did this kind of vintage look, and then the rest that was on it was a whisker biscuit, and the sight that was on it is like 3 brass pins and a janky plastic housing around it. The peep has crap and feathers all hanging around it. It's just a cheap janky bow. And then I think it came with one of the like the $5 plastic releases that you could get, that I'm pretty sure when I started shooting it, I was clipping it under the arrow on the actual string, and I wasn't using a loop with it.
Yeah, so I remember like getting, and John has a bunch of the old stuff, but like I must have been like, maybe I might have been 12, because we had to be 12 to hunt. And so when I got that bow, and then like I went to like Myers, like our grocery store had a archery section, and they had a Cobra plastic thumb button release that opened up. I'm
pretty sure that's what it was. Yep.
And I did the same thing. I just hooked it underneath the arrow, and I was like shooting arrows everywhere. And this is, like literally got a hay bale from the farm across the street, and it was minute of paper plate at 20 yards and you're good. Yep. And I was not that. I was better so I was shooting fingers with a leather glove at 20 yards, and that was good enough.
Yep.
And that was it. So I was doing the same thing.
Were you hunting with that bow?
Oh yeah.
See, this is the interesting thing, is you were hunting with that setup. You were trying to shoot and murder an animal with that setup, and people were like, "I can't shoot a deer at 60 yards." You're like, you shouldn't shoot at deer when you have this setup. Like if we're talking about the ethics of shooting an animal. Now, obviously, if you can if you're hitting a tennis ball at 20 yards with that setup, totally good to go, rock it out. But yeah, I think plate 20 yards.
But I think the mentality was always like reverse engineering it, right? So like, I don't know how accurate the Indians were or whatever, but they were using a stick and a rock. So this is better than that, right?
And it got you into it. Like, that's the thing. It got you into something that you now love. So should you have had that taken away from you because of some, ethical thing? And obviously the answer is no, but
So prior to like all of this, and like it has only like in the last year or so, and like when you were talking about on another podcast that you were on, doing like trajectory testing with different weight arrows and things like that, like when I was junior in high school, I still had that same bow. That was the bow that I was using, but we had to do a physics project. And so what I did is I did different weight arrows, but they were in grams, not grains, right?
Yeah.
And I had a tape measure attached to a pendulum, and I would shoot the target on the pendulum, and then the amount that it moved, and then just reverse engineered like that physics equation. And that was like that's
awesome.
That was my project.
Yeah, yeah.
This is, very early internet days and like all of that. So that wasn't like I was stealing anybody's ideas, or like I could just go on like, the calculators where I was like, oh yeah, we'll just figure it out. Like,
Yeah. But
this
that's
was all
awesome.
math. Like,
Yeah, but like it's that curiosity that we've been talking about, that kind of that pushes you forward. You learned a ton about that stuff at that moment, and you learned like, okay, if a deer, the problem is you probably didn't understand like a heavier arrow is probably going to do a better job penetrating than a lighter arrow. I don't know, for the
I just
longest
knew it had
time.
more energy.
Okay, but you'd actually done the research and figured out like when this thing hits, yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I completely forgot about that until like you were like, oh, when you're like, oh, we're gonna do these videos and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I did shit like that when I was like,
my dad. Well, so I go back like farther than Adam. I mean, my dad was like, he shot at the club. This is way back, and he painted all the bows for originally the bows came and they were all shiny. They all looked like target bows. And so for the local shop here in Muskegon was called Angler Archer. And my dad would get all the bows. Like when they sold a bow, they'd like, do you want it camouflage? Like, sure. So they'd tack on $20 and they'd send them to my dad, and he'd spray paint them all black. And then I remember as a kid, I'd cut out the shop would give us a bunch of old hunting magazines, and I would sit there with the X-Acto knife and I would cut out all the pictures of the bucks and does.
Oh man.
And then he would use those to spray its silhouette, like airbrush them on.
That's awesome. See, and, I wish I would have been in at that stage. Like my dad was an accountant, so no, we weren't. But that's super cool, man.
But then he did all kinds of stuff. Like he was always trying to make the bows faster, and so he actually made his own. Now looking back, it's terrible. Like he made his own overdraw, so that way he could shoot a smaller diameter arrow, and then it would, in order to shoot, I think we were shooting 18-16, so double X75, 18-16 arrows out of, back then like a 65-pound bow, but we'd have to shorten them up so much to get the right flight out of them. But talking about hand torque and everything, you think about it, and then back then they didn't have a shoot through riser. So, he had to shoot these broadheads that were just tiny. They were like, I think they were called Savoras. They're like just a little 4-blade razor blade. And then all of a sudden PSE came out with the machined riser with the actual overdraw, the Mach Flight 4s. And then, they're like, yeah, we need to get away from that crap. But so I shot.
Dude,
and then
so what year are you talking about? Like how far back is this going?
This is back in the early 80s when,
okay.
And then, then the mid 80s.
You think about the technology that has changed in just 40 years.
Right.
That is insane what has happened in 40 years for bows. Like if you could literally take a new Matthews and show somebody back then and be like, shoot this because this is what this is going to become. And they were like, who does the painting on them? That's really cool. No. You don't understand.
Yeah. And
dude, that's awesome.
Back then, so I had to, I started out, I had to shoot the little recurve, and then once I got, pretty proficient with that, he let me have my first compound, but it was just fingers and no sight. And then when I got good with that, then he's like, okay, you can have a sight. So I got one brass pin, and it was still fingers. And he always shot, he had like basically cut his hand off when he was like 18, and they sewed it back on. So he had like no feeling. So he had to use, it was called a hot shot. It was a 2-finger thumb release. And then he modified it with the loop and stuff, because originally it just had the one metal pen or a pin on it. And so he did all the stuff with the extending the loop, and they didn't have a D loop back then. You just shot with, you had your brass knock on the top, and then you had like an eliminator button. Actually, Adam just asked about those. Like they come on the Bowtech still, like the little rubber buttons that are on the string.
Okay.
Those are like the eliminator buttons. I used to slide those up, and you'd have that underneath. That way, when you're drawing back with the actual release on the string beneath the arrow, it wouldn't pinch the nock as bad. It would that
Right.
rubber button would cushion it, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, we
Dude.
shot that for years like that. I
So
still
I mean,
have a
what
hot
type
shot.
of distance could you be accurate to with that setup?
So my dad was like a badass. He could kill this. We had this little plastic piggy bank. It was a pink bear, I remember it. And he put it out like 55 yards, and he was like, he could drill that
Holy
thing
crap.
right in the, you know, I'm like, and everyone was like, man, that's badass, you know, like 55 yards. He's shooting 55 yards. And but he was, you know, he was a good shot at it. But
Yeah.
now thinking back, like, shoot, that's what I practice at every day, basically. You know,
Right.
like I go out and shoot 60 yards. But
yeah, but it like those setups, I mean, it sounds like just duct tape together, you know, like, yeah, that's.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. So like my dad bow hunted, but he wasn't his passion. So he, you know, he rifle hunted. He went out west and rifle hunted. My grandpa never bow hunted. He rifle hunted all over North America and Africa and everything. And so then I marry into this family, and it's like, so his dad worked at this bow shop, and my father-in-law, his uncle, worked at the other bow shop. And so like,
and then my other uncle was his family. So there was two big bow shop, or two big like sports shops in Muskegon. One was on the north shore of Muskegon Lake, and that was Angler Archer. And they, you know, obviously fishing gear and archery equipment. And then the other big one was Spring Sporting Goods. Well, my mom's
sister,
my mom's sister married Phil Spring. That was the other sporting goods store. So
yeah, you're just freaking inundated.
Yeah,
man. That's,
and so
yeah.
So like, my Uncle Frank, his father-in-law, he went to work for Springs, and he worked in the archery, and he met Fred Bear, and he was just telling us the other day about how, you know, because they went to the trad show here in Kalamazoo, and he's like, man, I remember when the compound bows came out, we had stacks of the old like Bear trad bows, and basically put them in a barrel, and they were like $20 a piece, you know, just get rid of them. They weren't selling.
And all these used bows at the show were $300, you know, and he's like, I probably sold a bunch of those, you know. And
dude, that's, yeah.
And so like when you're like thinking about this, like how far archery's come and like where we're at with equipment and all these things, like, you know, I just wandered into this mecca, and I'm like, all right, this is cool, you know, like you go into the pole barn there, and it's like Cabela's, you know, I mean, there's like tree stand, I mean, they're everything. And like when I brought my bow over, they just took my bow and they're like, okay, you know, slap this on there, we'll change the rest out, we'll do this, okay, shoot like this, you know. And so for me, that just like made it one more level, right?
Dude, you got picked up from like where you were on the journey and brought way forward.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the cool things about YouTube, is because I wouldn't have had, like, I didn't have anybody. I remember the first arrows that I had when I was 15. I didn't realize that there was an insert that was supposed to go inside of the shaft, and I literally just took some points, put some glue around them, and then just held them as straight as I could in the end of the arrow, like just hold. So, you know, maybe had there been a YouTube, I would have been able to watch. But you were super fortunate. And that, I feel like that's before YouTube, that's the kind of stuff that it would take to get people into, like, nobody would even have taken the risk. Like, well, I want to learn how to, you know, whatever, bow hunt. And if you didn't know somebody, because the first time you go out and you go buy all the gear and you immediately shoot like total crap, and then you're like, oh man, I don't know what to do to make this better. Like, especially if the arrow's coming out and it's doing, you know, some fun stuff, or you put broadheads on and then all of a sudden you just have a disaster and you have no idea what to do to fix it. You know, like, yeah, you got lucky, man. You got lucky to have been married into that.
Yeah. And you should see his cousin, like my wife, she's cool. She's a bonus, you know. It's not like I got like the ugly chick or like whatever, and I'm just like, well, the bow hunt stuff's cool, so I'll stick around, you know. I'll tolerate it. I just got
That's funny.
lucky.
Well, I really don't like my wife, but
yeah,
I love the family.
Bow stuff in her family, so
yeah. Yeah, you know, so I could be worse. Right?
I get it. Yeah, I mean, the legacy of the legacy of all that. I wish I had that type of legacy, but I'm an adult onset archer is what I consider myself for sure. Like, just because I had the bow, you know, when I was 15 forward, I wasn't doing a ton of stuff with it, and it wasn't until I was 29 that I bought this place that things kind of started to take off again. And then, yeah, I mean, just probably in the last 4 years is when I've really gotten really serious and started taking more steps to try to learn more stuff about all this. And yeah, learning in public and posting in public, not being worried about being embarrassed.
One of these days we should go through some of all the old stuff. I still have like one of the original, like one of the first drop away rests that I can remember. Like it was actually just an inertia rest. It was called the trap door.
Whoa.
And that thing, you put it on the boat and you cocked it. And when you shot, it dropped. There was no cables, nothing. And I think actually, I can't remember.
Was it just feeling the forward? Like, was it just feeling the forward pressure of the bow?
Yep. Just so like, if you let down fast, it would drop.
It would drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still in my drawer with all, I mean, I got all kinds of old stuff. I still have one of the original hot shots.
You should totally, like, just to show people where bows have come from, especially if you're a big, like being the big bow nerd that you are, showing like
the progression.
You were given an old Cougar, an old Cougar bow that's above our fireplace, and it's got these tiny little roller wheels, and it's beautiful wood riser, but I'm sure it's one of the early compound bows. And I've never tried to shoot it because I don't want to break it, but it's got the metal D loop on it.
Yeah.
So
I still have, I have the very first Matthews I bought, which was it was the Matthews Z Max. Well, it was called the Feather Max. It was the year the Z Max came out. And that is still hanging up, and maybe it's at my buddy's garage now, because I think I sold that one twice too. But
see, it'd be a cool YouTube video to see how those shoot, like see if you can get them all set up, get it dialed in with arrows, and then to shoot it against one of the new ones and to see how it did. It'd just be interesting to see like how well, because you can get it to tune, I'm sure, as long as it's shooting consistently, you're going to be able to make arrows come out of it straight.
Yeah. And I think so. My dad passed away, it was 2 years ago now, but my nephew has his house, and I believe there's still one of the old bows hanging up in his garage that were with his paint job on it. So
man, that's awesome.
That 10 gauge has his paint job on it.
Yeah, the turkey gun.
Yeah. I'm just looking up here online. So my dad, he bought out of the back of a magazine like one of the first compound bows, and I'm trying to see like what year it was, but it's a Herder's, and he still has it, and it's still like in the garage, and it's a 6-wheeled compound with everything is metal cables.
Yeah.
Like,
yes. Okay. Yeah.
Little tiny stuff. And then it's got, what Frank calls the speed arms in the middle, but it's got these metal plates that are sandwiched in there. And like, it's pretty wild. Like, and so when I was hunting with my PSE bow, like when I was 12, my dad, which this bow, I don't even know what year this bow would have come out, like late 60s, early 70s, was still hunting with that bow.
Wow. The death machine with the freaking metal cables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and when I bought my bow, like I said, it was from like a classified ad garage sale. So the Bear is coming out this year with a new Bear Alaskan, and it's like the 30th anniversary or something. But like the Bear Whitetail 2s and the Bear, I think it was the Bear Alaskan, they had that same multiple cable system inside. And like that Bear Whitetail and the Bear Whitetail 2 was like a legit, like viable hunting bow. That was one of the industry standard bows at the time.
Yeah.
And
no, this is so far before me. I mean, it's like, it's just beyond. Yeah, that's crazy.
But it's just so like, I don't know, like I say, watching the stuff on YouTube and like things that you do, and like, so, with John, like building the strings and making, doing all of the tuning and like like for me, you could probably do it, But John's one of the few people that I know that can like literally just walk up to John Dudley and be like, hey man, this bow is fucked and here's why. And he's like, yeah, you just need to do this and do this. And he's like, yeah, I did all that. And then I put it back to stock because I'm getting rid of it. And he's like, well, whose string is this? This isn't the stock string. And he's like, I made this string. And he's like, you did?
Now, dude, he's way beyond me, man. I'm not above calling the shop and being like, hey, I can't figure this out. You know, help me out with some ideas. What is this? And no, dude, you're way deeper into the stuff than I am. Just
but the same
doing the same YouTube videos.
The same mindset though. Like that's where like to be like, all right, well, I'm gonna be able to figure this out. Or like, you know, I'm completely of the mind like it's not worth my time. Like at some point, like I don't know if you have, I'd imagine as far in your journey as you are, like you've had a bow like in the press or something and it's popped and you know something came off and like I don't want to do that. Like I don't want that. I'd rather have it be your problem, not my problem. Right.
I totally get it. And I think because you've got the relationship that you have, then you know you're lucky. For me, with the shops that were here, like I wanted to learn how to work on my own stuff, even just for like in the field knowledge. Like I can, you know, like I can fix a lot of stuff that can go wrong in the field, obviously to a certain point. One of the earlier elk hunts that I did with some buddies, one of the guys was like, I just had new strings put on it, you know, and it's shooting great. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And he takes it out of the case and it's got, you know, it's dusty and it's obvious that he hasn't shot in forever. And his peep is backwards. And he's like, I can't see how to peep. And we all just were looking at each other like, I don't know, what do we do? And now I would know exactly what to do in the field in that moment. And, you know, we would put something together that would be a little janky, but it would definitely get him through the hunt, you know. And he was a top pin guy. That was what they called themselves. Oh, if it's beyond the top pin, we're not shooting at it. Luckily we didn't see any elk that year, so not a big deal. But
So when you talk about like there not being that many shops around you or like whatever, like I'm starting to realize like from like we talked about, I want to talk about the total archery challenge type stuff, but like how really fortunate we are with like what we have. Like, do you have like a archery club or like somewhere to go shoot, a range, anything like that you haven't built yourself?
Sort of is the answer. There's Old Hickory Bowman Club here, but it's fairly limited as far as access. I did one 3D shoot last year and I drove 4 hours to get to it. Like if I want to go do something on a weekend, I am 100% going to have to drive at least an hour to get there, which, you know, like an hour is okay, but 2 or 3 or 4 hours. And I wasn't happy with I was shooting the Nexus last year as my like 3D bow, but I literally shot it twice at different 3D stuff. And I was like, man, I'm not happy with how this is going. And I don't want to keep messing with this thing, trying to get it like perfect. And I did later in the year, I switched it up and I used it for hunting later on, but it was just so much effort to be able to go and to be able to shoot 3D. Like that's what I'm super jealous of you guys and the Western guys that are like, oh yeah, no, I just drive over here and every weekend there's, you know, 40 people out there walking around the 3D range that we've got at our local club, you know. And we're working on that. Hopefully the Archery Den, which is our, you know, kind of more probably like biggest archery, you know, archery shop here, they're working on expanding and hopefully they'll get a spot where they can start doing more events. It's just, it takes like a person who's willing to put all that stuff together and be willing to put in the effort week after week after week to put on events and make it happen. And the culture here, I think it's probably just because of the animals, you know, like because we're only hunting whitetail here. But I guess that's probably, I mean, you guys aren't, it's not like y'all have
a
bunch of stuff.
Just whitetails here. And I mean, turkeys in the spring,
but it just seems
the
like
same down here, but I don't know why the like bow hunting culture in Michigan seems stronger than it does here.
Yeah. And like, so like you hunted with Travis Johnson and, you know, we had him on the podcast and he shoots at our club, but even like up where he lives, there's a club, up
well,
there, and there's multiple places around here. It sounds like you guys just need like a real estate guy to find you like a property or something, like something with like a pole barn and like a little.
If only we knew a real estate guy. No, we've been working on it. So yeah, we've been working on it. We're in the process of hopefully some good stuff. I think that there's like, if there's risk involved with setting up something like that, like what do you want to do? Well, we want to lease or purchase a very expensive piece of ground, and we're going to put some foam targets around it and let people fling sticks at them. Like it's risky. And especially in the county that they're in one of the most expensive counties in the country to buy stuff, because people want to put other things there besides just,
Sounds like a great buy and hold.
I'm with you. I want it to produce cash flow. And that's the problem is I don't think people want to sign up for $150 membership to go, shoot foam targets. Maybe they would. No, we're in the process. And honestly, I'm glad that for me personally, and probably not for a lot of people, but for me personally, I'm glad that I didn't have as much access, because it pushed me. Like if I was 10 minutes from a good shop and I could just take my stuff in there, that's probably what I would do. But the fact that I didn't have that, I got a press, I learned how to fletch my arrows, I learned how to reserve, I learned how to, tie my own D-loop, I learned how to change peeps, I learned how, all of that stuff. I felt forced to learn because I didn't have access to it. So I'm a little fortunate, and maybe that's a little selfish too, because other people that are around here, they don't want to spend that time. They probably have other hobbies, or they have kids. I don't have kids yet, so that's why I've got enough time.
So for your like in Tennessee, like you said, you shot 3D targets like twice last year or whatever. Was that like the Total Archery Challenge? And where is that in Tennessee from you?
It wasn't the TAC. It was further. That one was in East Tennessee, and it was just there's a club in East Tennessee outside of that one was outside of Knoxville. So, but the TAC is about 2 hours from us, and hopefully I can go do it this year, because I did it 3 years ago before they canceled all the stuff for COVID. And it was so fun, super fun. So I definitely want to go back and shoot the Tennessee one. I'd like to go to Michigan, and then Montana is the big priority. I did Park City last year and Glenwood Springs in Colorado, and both were super fun. I did Park City by myself, but when we were in Glenwood, I brought my wife and my brother-in-law and his wife, and we got like an Airbnb, and the girls hung out and they walked one of the courses with us, but they kind of did their own thing most of the time. And then we lost a bunch of arrows. So yeah. Dude, TAC events are so fun. It's so much fun.
So is that where you said you had some target panic type stuff?
Yeah.
I had a similar experience.
Yeah. So I've come to some realizations. I'm thinking about what's important this year. There's lots of, as I'm doing the bows, as I'm going through each of the bows, I'm kind of reprioritizing what I think in my mind is really important to me out of a bow. Like the prime is kind of loud, and you're like, okay, well, how loud is it? And it doesn't, when you're hunting, it's irrelevant, because every compound bow is loud enough, it's going to scare the shit out of the deer that you're shooting at 30 yards, and the deer is going to start to react. So, okay, does it then matter if it's 3 decibels louder? And so my shooting experience day after day is going to be impacted just a teeny smidge by it being just a scooch louder. No, that doesn't matter. So that's one of those factors that I'm kind of scratching off the list as far as priorities. What I am realizing is a big deal is I was shooting the Ventum 33, and what I've noticed with the Hoyt for me is I have kind of a jittery shot as it is. Like I don't know what it is about. Maybe I have just this wretched target panic coursing through my entire body all the time, but I feel like it's turned up. The Venom was giving me micro jitters basically the whole time. And the month before, as I was really shooting that thing, getting it dialed in, you know, shooting a 3D HV arrow, the Victory 3D HV, really lightweight, fast arrow. I just could tell. I completely lost the process that I was going through, and it was the pin. There's the thing. It's going. Let's make this thing happen, and boom, you know that. And it here in Nashville, it was not as bad. But then when I was in front of a bunch of people at higher elevation, over coffeeed from the morning, it was the combination of all those things. And then the landslide Excel site, that it's the Picatinny mount for the front of it. And I don't want to say anything bad about Excel. The 2 times that I took it off and put it back on and then was shooting it, it was not where I had left it. Now, I did it 2 more times where I traveled 2 more times with it, and we're talking about getting on a plane with it. Those other 2 times it was fine. And when I talked to the Hoyt rep at TAC, he was like, no, it must have been something you did, because they tested this thing and it was, you know, within 1,000th of an inch or something like that. There was very, very, very tight tolerances. So I'm willing to say that that was me. And there's a reason I haven't made, you know, a video about it or brought it up at all. But the faith in the gear, like, I just didn't feel like I had as much faith in the gear as I would have had I brought my VXR with my black gold sight that I'd been shooting, you know, that was like my rock, like my go-to, the thing that I feel, the bow that I feel the most confident and comfortable with. And I think it was just all those things. And then just the pressure that I had put on myself, you know, guys walking up to me like, hey man, I was watching you shoot up there on the you know, on the line. I was like, don't do that. You know, and then getting out on the range with the Epic Archery folks. We just happened to like meet up there, and great husband and wife team. They're doing some really awesome stuff for archery. And he was rocking that day, and we had a little competition going, and I watched some of the slow-mo video back of me at anchor one time on a 70-yard shot, and I'm literally just shaking. And again, I don't know if it was because of elevation or caffeine or target panic or all the things, but I shot like dog shit at both the TAC events. But the cool thing is, that's fine. That's fine with me, because it gives me a new thing to focus on this year. It gives me a new thing to understand, like, bow hold is becoming like an absolute priority for me. How does this bow sit on target? How forgiving is it? If I miss a shot a little bit, how far off is that arrow going? The inline 5 so far, if I miss a shot, the arrow seems to go twice as far out of the zone that I wanted to hit than the Bowtech. Now, those are the only 2 bows that I have in. They're both dialed up, like they're both shooting bullet holes through paper. But to me, the inline just doesn't seem as forgiving. So why the heck would I bring that bow? And it just goes to building this, you know, this like confident base inside of me, knowing like, okay, cool. I don't think I'm going to bring the 3D HV arrows. They're perfectly good arrows. I don't know. I want to shoot something that's probably going a little bit slower, because I feel like I didn't get them to tune as well as I was hoping. 330 feet per second is kind of, you know, like you're just kind of pushing the edge of the limit, I think.
So was it the entire event? Because like I know 2 years ago, like I can bring you right to the exact target, like where it all like went to shit. And like for me, it was like a snowball, like racing down the mountain, like from that moment on. And there was the next shot, you know, because you shoot, you know, unless you're saying, okay, we're give you a mulligan or like whatever, you're shooting one shot at the target and then you hike a few hundred yards or whatever. And then now all you're like, for me, all I'm thinking about was like, don't fuck up like I did on the last one. And now
Totally.
I'm being 3 inches low, and I'm like, okay, well, if I just bring it up and then phew, and and that's going now we're shooting uphill, so I'm swinging up and it's going up, so that one is 12 counties over, and so now I'm 2 arrows down, and so now the third one is like, oh my god, and the snowball's this big, and then you got everybody, oh my god, it like, I mean, I can bring you to the exact spot, and then I only had 5 or 6 arrows with me, and maybe I broke one, so now 2 of them are missing, one of them's broke, so now I'm down to like 2 arrows. I'm trying to shoot other people's arrows. I'm like, do you think this one will fly good enough? Like
don't do that. No, it's not worth it. Picking them up off the ground. Yeah, man. I think for me, when we were shooting at 70 yards at the house, because we literally went to, oh crap, what's the shop that's in I'm so bad, I can't believe it's Earl's shop. And oh guys, I'm so sorry if anybody's listening to this. I can't remember the name of the shop. It's in just outside of Denver on the north hand side. They make YouTube videos out of there. It's an awesome shop. We stopped there to get a target, brought it up to the mountains with us because had the bows, just wanted to buy a little cheap target. And when I put the sight back on the Excel sight and it wasn't hitting at 70, I was hitting about 6 inches low and 6 inches to the right. I was like, what is happening right here? And so then I kind of adjusted, but that like, is this wrong? Is this setup not stable? What's going on? What's going on here? And then the next day I go to the line, I'm shooting a matrix target at 50 yards, and it's doing kind of the same thing, this low right thing. And so I'm adjusting, and now I'm thinking like, okay, I mean, is the altitude affecting my tape this much? But that doesn't make sense. So the arrow should be flying, in theory, I feel like the arrow should be flying higher because the air is like, is it like golf and all where the ball goes a lot further at elevation? That's what it's supposed to be doing. And then what I end up doing is I end up clawing my hand up on my release, which is my, like, instead of having a relaxed hand with the proper grip that's really pulling back and pulling around myself, I claw my hand up, and then I get it's not necessarily punchy, but it's not relaxed, and the push is really bad. And I had targets that I looked like a genius on, like I 12 ring one at 90 yards. I shot the Sasquatch in the face twice, and then I had some that were just chip shots that I airballed, and I think the biggest thing for me was not having the faith in the gear, which I should have just said, no, you did all the work on the front end. Like, you're going to shoot this thing. If you're consistently hitting and missing one spot, like if you're consistently shooting a foot in front of the animal on the right hand side, then go ahead and adjust. But I was all over the place, so it was clearly me. I should have stopped, and I should have said, what is your actual shot process? Because that was the other thing that I just literally was like, please go in the foam, that was all and nobody cared. Like, everybody we were shooting with, nobody cares. Like, that's right. The other thing. And I don't get embarrassed. Like, I feel like I may have some sort of serial killer, something about my brain. Like, I can literally just be like, turn it off. I'm not embarrassed. I don't care. But I was a little embarrassed that day, but nobody else cared. Everybody else, we just had a good time, like, I still keep in contact with half the people that we went and shot with. It was about like making new friends, making new contacts, trying to put a hunt together, like those types of things. So I think the refocus for me this year is enjoying the event, making sure that I'm dialed in, probably going with something a little bit closer to a hunting setup, maybe, a little bit of a punchier setup, maybe a little bit, but more of a hunting setup. And then really just focusing on the Joel Turner stuff, really focusing on my process and really working on going through those different steps and being able to accept the results. Yeah.
It's like my biggest thing. It's like when we go up there, I'm my biggest critic, you know. So it's like I go up there with my expectations, like I'm not going to lose an arrow. I'm not going to break an
Yeah.
arrow. I'm going to bring a dozen and a half, but I'm not going to lose one.
Yep.
And when I lose one, and I'm like, damn it. But I go up there. I actually was like watching your video when you were getting ready for when you were building your setup. I'm like, man, that's ballsy. Like with shooting that high speed, like at those distance, it's like, that's not very forgiving, because I've done it, you know, and it's like, I'm going up there with, because I still want to shoot. I want to be able to drop one out there 127 yards. So you got to really play with, you know, there's a fine line where, I mean, I can do it a little better than most because I have a long draw link and I'm still shooting, you know. I think the one year I went up there with my Hoyt, my Arcs 1, I had my 80-pound limbs on it. So, I mean, I could shoot 150 yards without even worrying about clearance.
Yep.
But the other thing is, like the first morning when we get there and I go up to the line, I don't know any of those guys, but it's like, it's a whole nother ball game. You got to have confidence in your equipment. Like, I know my equipment. I know I'm going to put it on the 50 yard and I'm going to, you know, 12 ring that deer. But then I think the one year I think it was with my Hoyt. I had, you know, we were getting all of our gear set up to go out west. And so we're shooting with our quivers on, our backpacks, and I put my tight spot quiver and I like slid it in farther than I normally do. And I didn't realize it. Well, it didn't let my rest come all the way up. So,
oh man.
So I'm like, I'm aiming at this target. I'm like, choo, and there was still like this snowbank on the hill. And I'm like, where'd that go? Like, I didn't even see it. So I'm like, well, it's in there, I think, you know, like, phew, like, where'd that go? And then finally I'm like, someone watch where this arrow's going. It's like, phew. And they're like, dude, you're like 8 feet in front of that thing in the dirt. Like, I'm like, what? And then I'm like, something's going on, you know, and oh geez, my rest isn't coming up all the way.
And so
you're lucky.
For the two of you guys, like you're confident like in like yourself, in your equipment, like you're like, I know my equipment, all this stuff. Like I'm up there and I'm like, I'm confident in like my bow was good, so it has to be me. Like I wouldn't adjust my sight ever. I'd be like, God damn it, like you suck. Like I'm that stubborn that I'd be like I know this bow was on. Like I know, you know, you know when you're like, and it won't be. I'll put them all a foot right and be like, man, I just got a whole different.
I just did it right today.
Click, click, click.
Yeah. We're indoors shooting 7 yards, and John's like moving it left and right, you know, and he's like, sometimes it just is like that mental thing, like just to get out of your own head. You're like, oh, I must be 2 clicks to the left, or maybe something got bumped. Like, I mean, same thing. Like when I was in the Marines and shooting like on the range, like I zeroed this rifle. I know that it's on, like, and I'm shooting for the wind, and I put them out, and I'm like, man, I must be doing it wrong, you know. And then the coach will come over and he'll do like 2 clicks, and then you're right in there, and it's like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you know, but like, I know that the equipment was right. Like, it's got to be me. Like,
but see, I noticed like there are certain days where I feel like it's just the way I'm doing something that day, where like maybe I'm a little tighter than normal, or I'm a little looser than normal, and all I need is a couple clicks.
Yep.
And recognizing that and being willing to make that change. But I think that I just took it way too far. I mean, I didn't like change tapes while I was on the mountain or anything, you know, get like super crazy with it. But yeah, I think I just totally lost faith in what I had. And I actually set up, I wanted to take the 80-pound PSE EVL. That was my goal. But I literally could not get the arrows to fly out of it. It was just too much. Like it was just breaking down the spine way too much.
Right.
And so I backed down to the 70-pound Venom. And even then, I think it was, you know, it was fine. The arrows were doing what they were supposed to do a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to go with a more conservative, a little bit more of a hunting style setup this year. But the mental game, you know, and we all know like archery is so much a mental game. I'm glad I went last year because I'll know like I cannot possibly shoot worse than I did last year. So I will shoot better this time. The funny thing was we went one day and walked the locals course, and it was like the elk course. I don't know if it was the locals one. I think it was the Leopold in Glenwood. And it was me and this other dude from California. And we just went and shot it. And it was like, this is going to be real casual. And I was drilling the crap out of it because I didn't feel the pressure at all at that point. Like, you know, I was making murder on those elk targets. But then, you know, the morning and evening shoots that we were doing on the other courses. And then when you add John Dudley on the you know, the long bomb shots, I have my camera and I walk up to him and he goes, "Where's your cigar?" And I was like, oh no, he knows who I am. and then he was like, "Give me that camera and I'm gonna film you." And I was like, God, this is brutal. Luckily I hit the elk, but I you know, like it was a foot to the right of where it should have been for the dot. And that's okay. I'm gonna execute the process better next year. I don't know if the results will be any better, but I'm gonna focus on the actual process better this next year. Be more conscious of staying, you know, staying in each of the zones, thinking about my front hand, thinking about my stance, thinking about how I'm drawing, thinking about where I'm anchoring, thinking about making sure that my release hand isn't clawing up like it had been, and then thinking about moving from the aiming room into the actual pulling room, and then
Right.
Well, and that's like, John tells me this every Wednesday when we go and shoot. He's like, you know that there's this podcast with Joel Turner, like where he goes through all that stuff. Like, you should listen to it. And I'm like, I know, John. And so
he gave more information on y'all's podcast than he does on the vast majority of the things that I've ever heard him on. Like, I listened to that one because, you know, like he's obviously created, like, his process has created one of the best freaking archery phenoms ever out of a child.
Yeah. Do you see what he's doing now? I mean,
dude, it's insane. No, it's insane. And that's what I'm saying is there's obviously the secret sauce is definitely there, and he's willing to share it with you. So
yeah, then he'll post a video. He's like, yeah, I decided to build this bow because the kid's head was getting too big. So I built this bow and I went and shot a 300. Like I've never shot a 300. Come on. You know, so
no, it's
I'll say I dusted off my target and put it in the basement, and I put the knock to it away, and I got the silverback, and I'm like literally shooting at a block target and a brick wall. So it's like there is no time for like it's gonna explode. And that's the thing is, like, once, like, so now with the silverback, like, I get to full draw. And once I release the safety, you know, and I'm like, okay, find it, and then just pull. And what's crazy for me, and what happens, I think, like when we shoot at the club, because we shoot one arrow, then we walk, and then we go back and forth, is that my first arrow is the one that
sets the mood.
Because I shoot right now, I've got 4 arrows. I'm shooting at four spots on this block. And the first one is always the one where I'm like, there it is. And then the second arrow and the third arrow, you know, fourth arrow is like, I'm okay. Oh, you got plenty of time, but like, don't do what you just did. And like, like, I don't know how to like make that first arrow, like the don't do that arrow.
You just got to go. I went through the same thing. So, I mean, years ago when I first got my, first thumb release, I was like, oh, this is badass, and then all of a sudden I'm missing the whole bail at 10 yards. I mean, like shooting it above the bail into the freaking foam above, like, because I could not, I was just, and like, I'd never had target panic ever. I mean, I've shot my whole life and I'm like, target panic, what the hell is that? And then I read about it and everything. And then I was like, holy shit, I gave myself target panic. Like, what the,
I have that thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God. No, I got it. And so for me, like I'd still have a few good shots. And then I would, like I said, I would freaking completely miss the whole, we're shooting at small game silhouettes. Like, so a goose, a duck, a rabbit. And we go from 7 yards, 10 yards, 15, 20, 25 to 30. And like I said, we get one shot at each line for, the animal. And I'm like, man, I would like smoke the 30 yard and then go up and completely miss the duck at 10. What the hell? And so that was when I'm like, you know what? I got to put that release away, and I bought the silverback, and it was a struggle at first. I put some in the wood, you know,
In the
I
ceiling.
put one in the ceiling. But once I
But
got,
Joel,
yeah,
he
once I
didn't
got
want you
through
guys,
that,
he didn't want you guys to keep using the silverback though, does he?
no, he doesn't.
Yeah.
If we do, he wants you to be able to think about it and pull through and be able to stop it at any time. He wants you to be able to control that, whatever means of thumb, you know, index, hinge, whatever you're using, he wants you to be able to control that to the point where you can stop it at any time. And you're thinking about that. And that's, you know, that's what I've been doing lately with my hinge. But it took me, the silverback got me through the target panic thing. And I ended up, it got me to the point where I was thinking about it. And, you know, yeah, there was times where I'd think about, man, why isn't it going off? Why isn't it going off? But just pull, you know, it's going to go.
Yep.
And I shot like that year. I shot one whole year. I think I still ended up shooting the high score that year.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like I wouldn't have any 4s, but I'd have a few more 10s than I would like. But because our scoring ring's 15, 10, 4.
Okay.
But no 4s. And, you know, I mean, then I was like, okay, I've got control of this. And then,
but I mean, like, why would you give up the silverback unless you really think like you're plateaued? And I think I can get to that next level. Like, why would you ever it's obvious that you're extremely accurate with it. Like, why would you give that up? Even though Joel is saying like, no, I mean, a tension release is not what we want people ultimately using. So like, if I shot like that, I would never give it up.
So there was points where like, I mean, we're only shooting, like I said, 1 arrow. So we shoot 20 arrows in the evening. And by the end of the night, I was definitely feeling that. I mean, cause you're, you know, pulling at that 14 pounds or whatever, every shot. And then of course, Dudley come out with the 2 smooth. So I'm like, oh, I got to have that, you know, and I about broke my nose off my face with that thing, you know, the first, you know, few weeks I had it, you know, shooting my 80-pound Hoyt, grabbed it and, you know, and my nose is big enough as it is. But once I got that down to where I was comfortable with it, I was way more consistent. Like then there was like, you know, it was 15s all the time, you know, and then a couple 10s. Yeah. And then I dropped it. And that's what I was talking about, you know, where I brought it to him up when at TAC last year. I'm like, I dropped the release and I shot it at first with no click. And I dropped it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I looked at it, everything looked, and all of a sudden I had a click. I'm like, what happened? Now I'm like, now I just lost that confidence level. Then I'm like, then all of a sudden it wouldn't have a click. But it was like, I didn't engage the click or what. It was like, so I'm like, oh, back to square one. Like, oh shit.
It's interesting because like Joel will walk up to you in the training and he'll like tap you with stuff. So it's crazy because I've got a hinge as well that's got a click. And when I first started doing it, the same thing, that click would go and I'd be like, what the, you know, like just, yeah. So how do you deal with, that's when we know that I think we're doing something wrong in that case. You know, like if this little tiny click is freaking my brain out, like what,
right.
Yeah, what's going on? That's, man, there's a reason that I don't put out a lot of videos on like telling people how to shoot. Right. I like to talk about gear and I feel competent in basically analyzing gear, but I don't feel terribly competent in like shot sequence, sure, but like the confidence that I would like to portray in like, okay, here's how I overcame, you know, and maybe that'll be the video of the TAC redemption story of 2022 is like the first arrow out of the gate. The way I've started shooting that on the day is drawing, making sure that I'm in the process and trying to make that the slowest execution I can make. Like I want to feel every little quarter pound that I'm increasing that pull before boom, it goes off. And then I go, okay, cool. You did that. Now you can kind of speed back up into your process. And you're talking about kind of setting the tone for your day, that's kind of what I do when I walk out for a session. Because when I was at Elk Shape Camp last year, Dan had me go out with everybody, and he was like, you killed an elk at 85 yards. Let's do an 85-yard cold shot right now. Do the cold shot. And I shot, whatever, a foot high, because I was nervous as hell because I'm standing in front of all these people. And it was because, in spite of the nerves, I should still be able to execute my process. I should still, on arrow number 1, be able to pull through. And maybe I'm not hitting the heart at 85 yards, but I should still be able to focus on my process, make sure my hand's not doing the claw, and that, yeah, dude, it's going to be a lifelong journey for me. Like I'm 100% positive that it's going to be a lifelong journey, but that excites me. Like if I feel like I had somehow mastered this thing by, no, that makes me excited to know that I will constantly be thinking, like, until I'm breaking knocks every arrow at 100 yards, then I'm not doing it right. I can keep getting better. And yeah, that excites me because it makes me want to stay on the path and stay on the journey.
Yeah.
So then is that your, because I was going to ask you, like, your answer, and I don't think the question is ever answered, right? Of like target panic, right? Because you can, like I said, you can be 12 targets in and then all of a sudden it goes off the rails. So like, how do you recover from that? Do you go back to that slow execution? How do you get out of your own head?
Well, I wasn't able to do it the last time. So I don't, when I got back, I'll tell you what I did. When I got back, I put the venom away and I got out the PSE EVL with a 550 grain arrow that I knew was dialed in. That was the hunting setup that I was going to use for heavier stuff. And it holds a lot better for me. And so the confidence that I had of just being able to stand on my driveway where nobody's watching. And then it was like just the noise that I felt at TAC where there was all this stuff going on that I wasn't able to get out at that moment, just kind of went away when I got back here. But that doesn't count. Like, that's the thing. And that's one of the reasons that I want to go to more 3D shoots this year. And honestly, that I need to go shoot paper inside, because I feel that same pressure when you put a blank 3-spot in front of me, that like oppression of, you have a clean piece of paper in front of you right now and you can shoot a perfect 300, or on your very first arrow, you can just screw it up right now. Some of the, like, there were days when I'd go put paper in front of me and I would purposefully shoot like a 9, like just purposefully shoot it in the red just to say, you're not shooting perfect. So now you can relax, go ahead and execute the rest of the day. So like, that's what I'm saying is for me with the target panic, I would not claim to have, I don't claim to have much input on it, because I don't think that I did a good job conquering it in the moment. I think what I'm going to try next time is talking out loud to myself through the shot, which sounds ridiculous, but like one of the ways to stay out of your subconscious is to actually be using your frontal cortex, which is speech. Okay, where's your hand on the bow? Here it is. Your feet are good. You feel steady. Draw the bow. Where's your anchor? Make sure that you stay in your housing. Make sure your peep stays in your housing. How are you? You're in the aiming room. Okay, now let's go. And then quiet and pull through the shot. And if you miss, but you executed the process right, I don't know. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's perfect every time.
Dude, that's my every single time at the Bowman's Club, right? So like, I'm in there and like, I'll just get pissed and I'll just punch a trigger, poof, shoot a 15. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that was an awful shot. That was terrible. I'll shoot a 4. I'll be 4 inches low. Everything is low. All my shots are low. And it's not because I was trapped low. It was because like, that's where it, and I'll be like, I made a great shot right there. And they're like, well, don't do that anymore. Just punch the trigger. Let's get some 15s. Let's beat these motherfuckers. And I'm like, this is wrong. Like, this is awful.
But you know what? That's another interesting thing is like, so you watch Levi Morgan, and I think he goes through a lot of these same gyrations. Like he has changed his shot up over time. And I've watched videos of him where he's at draw and his thumb is slowly moving toward the trigger. It's off the trigger by like an inch and a half, and then he'll slowly move it toward it. And as soon as it touches the barrel, bam, that bow goes off. It's not a trigger punch, but what is that? What is that thing? And what is it in his mind? Arguably the greatest archer that has ever lived in modern history is like, no, it's not been good enough. You're like, are you kidding me right now? Like, what are you doing? Just keep doing what you've been doing. But he tweaks and he changes, and you know, that's why I'm saying I think it's the infinite journey. And as far as the trigger punching thing goes, are you really punching? Like if you have your thumb on the trigger and you're just thinking like, no, I'm really steady, I'm holding on target now, I'm going to go ahead and let my thumb muscles do the work right now, and I'm going to just hold steady through my back, like, is that the end of the world?
All of this happens
not.
in 1.5 seconds.
Yeah.
So
like the shot on the turkey or the shot on the his buck this year, he was showing me the video. He's like, yeah, I shot this buck, and we met back here after it happened. I was hunting in a different location, and he starts the video, and the video like starts, and the buck's walking in, and it was like 7 seconds. I'm like, dude, you turned the video on, got your release, drew back, and shot in 7 seconds. That's
you're like
quick.
You're like, you're an asshole, and I'm positive that you punched that trigger, because that is crazy fast.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
like when you say like, are you really punching it? I'm like, yeah, because I'm like,
Bent the
there
thumb
it is.
right
Pow.
off of it.
Like,
Bam. Yep.
Damn it. That's the third thumb button I went through.
but then when I take the time and I take the 7 seconds on my shot, and the shot breaks the way that it's supposed to, you know, and it's
And you
like
miss.
4, and these guys are like, oh, terrible shot. And I'm like, that one felt great, you know.
That one,
But then is it
yes.
me? Is it the equipment? Is my sight even on? Should I just do the Page Pierce and just adjust my sight so that it's like,
well that's like what I went through with that silverback, was like that whole process. And I got to the point where I wasn't getting, you know, way outside. I was consistently in, you know, the 10 ring, and it was like, it wasn't my standard, but I could tell I was getting a better shot. I had a better process, and I wasn't thinking about all the other, you know.
But your results were actually getting better. And what Adam's talking about is like, no, my results get worse. And so it's the anti-reward for I'm being punished for executing correctly.
right.
And I think the thing with target panic, or with punching the trigger, is that it leads to something that is far worse.
Right.
You know, like it leads to something where all of a sudden you're like locked off target, or you've got major shakes, or just something is going on that's far worse, and that is because you're actually punching. But
like what you were saying about like Joel Turner, right, is like, that's probably why he doesn't want you to use because in John's situation, he can be more accurate with a different type of release, because he's now in control. He's 100% in control, but he used that to build his process. So now he knows how to pull through. And so now he can kind of meld the two together and make that perfect shot instead of a really good shot, you know?
Yeah. See, and I feel like if I was shooting the absolute best and most accurate that I'd ever shot, and my results were the best with a rubber chicken as a release, I would never not shoot the rubber chicken. I'd be like, let's do this. You know, like, yeah, I would just shoot a rubber chicken.
Oh, shit.
I want to see that in the next video. So like,
at least it wouldn't hurt as bad when you get hit in the mouth with it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the problem. Is always the barrel. It's like sandpaper. I've done that more than once.
I think when I asked John about doing a podcast with you, like, because I always like say, hey, what about this? And he's like, oh yeah, he punched himself in the face, threw his bow on the ground, like that guy.
I love like the bow goes.
Dude, it hit the engaged limbs because I had the limbs on the Matthews, and it hit them and bounced over into the grass. No problem with the bow. I picked it back up and shot the rest of the day. It was perfect. No problems. I got super lucky. I got super lucky. If I hadn't had the limbs on it, hadn't been perfect like right there, I would have blown something up for sure.
Well, shoot, our first night of archery league, it was snowing like crazy, and there's a handicap ramp going up into our club, and there's a metal transition piece. Well, it used to have like the grip tape. Well, the grip tape is wore off, and I was like running late that night, and I'd never carry my bow in a case, so I just grab a bow, you know, because I don't like taking my stabilizer off or anything. So I grab my bow and I'm running up there, and I hit that metal ramp. It was covered in snow. Whew, I freaking fly up in the air and I land on my bow.
Oh
like,
gosh.
I'm like, oh shit. And I mean, I still have a scar, like my knuckle is just finally healing up. That was over 4 weeks ago. But I go in and they were already setting up targets. I didn't even have time. So I had to go over to the practice side, and I'm shooting and I'm like hitting 6 inches left. So I'm like, well, you know, let's crank it. I'm like, all right, I'm hitting the target. So, and then I like later, like the next week, I looked at the bow and I'm like, oh shit, there's a mark in the limb right here, you know, like, you know, but it ended up, it was all right. But man, that was.
But I mean, you were able to shoot. What bow did you land on?
The Bowtech, the Revolt X.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Yeah, my knee landed like on the freaking riser, and the cam hit, and then most of it went on my sight.
Yeah, no big deal.
But that was the HHA sight.
Yeah.
And then I switched over. I put one of my Excel sights, and I put the UltraView scope on it. So the sight's gone now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on my other bow.
Yeah, I just got the Excel with the UV3 rigged up on the inline, and I really like that setup. It's real slick.
So I'm looking at my notes here, like from one of our Patreons, he wants to know like what and YouTube guys with your like for like veins, like they want to know like 3 fletch, 4 fletch, and like vein size, height for like sound and all that sort of rigmarole.
Yeah, so I did a lot of testing like 2 years ago with all that stuff, and the AAE Max Stealth with a 4 fletch configuration is still the best one that I've found. Like I tested, I don't know, a dozen different ones with a broadhead. So like a fixed blade broadhead. I just found that they grouped better when you got out to distance. When you're doing like 20 yards to 40 yards, a lot of the stuff, it's not, to me, it's not going to matter a lot. Like it's just not. It's when I get to 60 and beyond is when I really start noticing the subtle differences. So that's another thing. Like this year, what I would love to do is not refletch any arrows. I would like to just go buy 24 arrows. And I think like the last set of Eastons that I bought, the Axis, they have blazers on them, and they're not loud like the blazers before. So I don't know if blazer changed something, or maybe I'm just not like listening. I need to probably put a camera up and check it out, because blazers for the longest time were really loud. But to make a long story short, what I have found with a fixed blade broadhead, 60 yards and beyond, the AAE Max Stealth in a 4 fletch configuration is my favorite.
That's exactly what I shoot. I mean,
so have you done 6 fletch? Have you done?
You know what? I had a dude send me some information on 6 fletch. I have not done 6, but I'm still trying to balance, like, I still like the idea of keeping a decent FOC. I'm not like, I don't want 25 FOC, although I've built some just insane, ridiculous arrows that had 25% FOC. AAE Max Hunters are the loudest vanes that I've ever shot. I don't think I've shot all of them. Tack vanes, the 2.5 inch drivers are awesome, but they're not durable. So like they, like
crinkle up on you.
I had one right behind me because it's cold here right now, and I stacked arrows because I got, whatever, I got lucky. It stacked one and one, ripped in half. So I wouldn't shoot tacks for a hunting setup. Well, I say that, I guess you're not really stacking arrows. No, I wouldn't, because you're putting your bow in sort of horrible places. So like the durability, that's the other thing about the AAEs that I like, is they recover. So even if you've squished the thing because you put your backpack, in the back of a truck, and somebody else was being a little negligent, just puts their stuff a little bit on yours, and you happen to, to squish them down, I feel like they recover a little bit better. Hit them with a lighter real quick, and you're off and running. I've been running some wraps. I've actually got some Mere Mortal wraps made up, and I'm kind of still testing them to make sure that they're durable enough. I don't want to sell stuff that's, like, I want to make sure if I'm going to sell something on the website that it's like durable and going to be something that holds up. And so far they're doing good, but I'm going to shoot them a little bit longer. Yeah.
So
I just like wraps because it's easier to change. Like, just zip it off with a knife, like I'm not having to sand off a bunch of glue or anything like that off there. So I like running some wraps.
So your Mere Mortal project, like, so how did that all come about? And like, you talked about giving some bows away, and you've got some things.
We don't have to go into Mere Mortal yet if you don't want to, or we don't have to at all. I'm not trying to like interject it in to the conversation. I apologize.
No. I mean, it's one of the things I think that is really good to talk about, because like, from a bystander, like casual viewer type thing, like, oh, who's this Brandon McDonald guy? Like, oh, he's just a YouTuber, blah 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 blah. And it's like, that's one of the things that like I'm trying to figure out, like right now, like with what we're doing, is like, what's the next step to like give back to, like, conservation, or like whatever. Like we talk about all of these things, and it's great to have to be successful in what you do, but like the bigger thing is like, what do you do next? Like, what do you do? Is it strictly for yourself, and like, oh yes, now you're famous, great, awesome, like, or are you doing it for other things?
Yeah. So I mean, I think a lot about legacy, and like watching my grandpa die, when like watching my two grandpas pass away within the last 10 years, and the difference in impact that each of them had on their family and their community. One had very little impact on their community. One had a great impact on their community. And then watching Jocelyn's grandpa pass away, having just unbelievable ripples that we didn't know about. Like, he changed people's family trees forever because of the stuff that he did in the community that they were in, and deciding what kind of man I want to be and what I want to leave behind. I didn't serve in the military, and I don't want to say that it's a regret, but if I were to regret something, that would probably be on the list. So I realized, like, I didn't want to just take the bows that I was using and then sell them. That would be fine. But I felt like there could be something that was better. And so Mere Mortal Archery, basically I created it so that we could take gear that I was testing, and I've had people give me bows, and that's been ridiculous. Like, I've had guys send me, like $2,000 setups with scopes and everything all set up on these bows that are like this year's bow. They do what I do. They just, they don't have a YouTube channel. They shoot through them and they say, I don't want this one. And rather than selling it, here you go, give it away. And I kind of got involved with OEW, Enduring Warrior, and Caleb, that was the kind of head of the archery department over there. He's down in Arizona. I was shipping him the bows, and then he was giving them to guys that were kind of in their program. And what I've found is it's more complicated than I was hoping it was going to be. All the profits, like, I've got shirts and hats, and I think I'm going to add the wrap soon, and then I've got some hoodies that are going to come out soon. I'm wearing one of the hoodies, just again making sure that it's like holding up in the laundry. I just don't. My worst nightmare is selling something that just turns to crap. I absolutely don't want to do that. 100% of those profits that are coming in from that are going to basically feed this Mere Mortal thing. And I've got some events planned in my head. I don't want to say it out loud yet, because I feel like if I say it out loud, then I'll be obligated to actually complete it this year, and that maybe put too much pressure on there. But the legacy that I want to leave behind is helping to impact people's family trees. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to start talking about money a little bit more, talking about business a little bit more, because I feel like the hunting stuff is, like there's definitely legacy to that. Like, listening to you guys talk about the family tree of bows in your family and archers in your families, like that's so cool. And I don't have that, but what I had was a grandpa on one side who taught my dad about business, and my dad who taught me about business. And so that was something that I felt like was important. So I wanted to, that's part of the legacy that I want to try to kind of create. And when I was with Troy down in Texas, that was one of the things that he talked about, is basically like, what are the stories that you want people to tell about you when you're not here, and live life every day like they're going to tell that story. And so that's what I'm, kind of starting to attempt to do a little bit more.
Awesome. And one of the things that I was going to interrupt you there, but one of the things that makes it more difficult is some of these guys are left-handed, right?
That was embarrassing. Yeah, I felt so bad. That was one of the first ones that we gave away where they felt comfortable doing it, like on Instagram, an Instagram live, like, here you go. And the guy was like, dude, awesome, there's a problem. He didn't say it in the video. He's very gracious, but I actually got to shoot with him at TAC. We went out and shot, and it was so awesome, man. Just like hearing his story and the journey that he's on, and realizing like he's going to have, he got a building dropped on him. He was a firefighter, and he's going to potentially have brain stuff for the rest of his life, and I don't know. It's been tougher than I thought it was going to be. Honestly, I've found that like the type of people that I would like to reach and give the hope of archery to, because I think that there's this interesting thing that happens when you get into archery. There is a discipline that comes with it, and then there's this anticipation of the next time I go out here, I'm going to do this better, and I'm going to be a better archer the next time I go out, because I've been practicing. And the goal of like, I'm practicing for a hunt, so the anticipation of the future, and again, just the future, it would keep a lot of people from committing suicide. It would keep a lot of guys maybe out of the bottle, because they would realize like, okay, this is detrimental to that future. But what I'm finding is that it's more difficult to find those people that are even willing to take a step. Like you're getting guys that are saving themselves, that have made the decision of, I'm not going to be this person anymore, and I'm going to work through all of the stuff that I know, and the shit that is not my fault but is now my responsibility. Unfortunately, I'm going to work through this. And then you get the people that won't fill out an application for free stuff, and it's bizarre. It's bizarre to me, but I don't know how to reach those people, because the people that really need to be reached are the people that I just want to go grab them and lock them in a room for a year and say, all right, let's figure you out. Let's figure all this stuff out. Again, it's not your fault, but now it's your responsibility. And we're going to go on a hunt the day you get out of this place. Here you go. Let's figure this out. And every day work through stuff. But, obviously can't do that.
Yeah. And I think I'd imagine like, the guys that I know and the people that are like the most in need or whatever are also like the most prideful people. And there's going to be a huge barrier, like there's going to be a big line right there that's going to have to be like tiptoed or coerced or or whatever.
Or they just have to decide. Like, it just has to be their decision at the end of the day. Like, I can't, you know, we can put the gear in your hands, but like, if I don't know, I struggle with this one, like, because I don't want to, I want to help. Like, I want to actually be a help in the space. And I don't want it to be something where, you know, some sort of like hero complex that comes in of like, no, you have to let me help you so that I feel good. It's not, it's not that.
Yep.
Like, I just truly want to make sure that I'm like doing something that's actually valuable. And I felt like the need was going to be, I felt like it was going to be overwhelming. Like, I was going to be like, awesome, I'm going to start fundraising. We're going to get a shitload of gear. We're going to get a bunch of money for guys to, you know, we're going to try to figure out how to get guys on hunts, you know, like all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is, like, I've had other organizations kind of reach out that I need to make contact with, and I need to make more time with this. But even like getting product out, it's difficult for me to say, okay, tonight I'm not going to make a video. I'm going to go mail this stuff out. And it's difficult for me to do that because it feels like such a huge waste of time for me to do it. But if I have to pay somebody with where everything is now, the profits almost go away. You know, like I've talked to a couple of companies and the order fulfillment stuff, which it's a whole new business that I'd never, you know, I'm just figuring it out. I think I'm kind of just talking out loud, but the bottom line is I'm still figuring all this stuff out, and I'm going to keep moving forward. But just like archery, you know, year one, you don't know what you don't know. And that's where I'm at with this, but I'm going to keep moving forward. And there's definitely some guys that, you know, that I feel like their lives have been blessed by this, and hopefully we can keep doing more. Yeah.
Well, and ultimately, like, whether it's, you know, just spitballing or talking out loud or working through it, I mean, for anybody that's listening, it shows like where you're coming at this from. So it isn't like, you know, like I said, like when you started this, like, oh yeah, you just want to be famous between the ages of 35 and 40 on YouTube, white males.
That's what I'm saying.
And then
hell yeah.
when you're famous, like, what are you doing with it? And it's like, you know, trying to legitimately like make an impact. But I can see what you're saying, where it's not like you're trying to be like, no, you don't understand. Like, for me to feel good about myself, I have to help you. And that's, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw like there's a lot of missionaries. Like, yeah, there's a lot of like missionaries that that inadvertently, I think, like there's a story about missionaries were buying, like churches were buying cows for people, and I can't remember what country. I feel like it was in India. Was it India? I can't remember.
Sacred,
maybe it wasn't.
And they would eat them.
Yes, but they were milking cows, and so this group of missionaries shows up to this like condo complex, and somebody on the second floor has a cow on their balcony of the condo complex, and they're like, the church, they gave us this cow, and we're in a city, but they gave us the cow. And so, you know, like, so I don't want to give people cows that live in cities. That's what I want to make sure is happening, that it's actually a real help. And I get it, like, that was a mistake, and maybe it didn't even happen. But if it did happen, that's freaking hilarious. But I want to make sure that I'm not doing that. Yeah. And I don't give a shit about being famous in the archery community. Like, I find, I say that I do want to get invited on cool hunts because people are like, well, I mean, Brandon's got a big YouTube following, so he'll film this and that'll be good for this and whatever. Like that is on the table 100%. But I don't care if people walk up to me at TAC and say, I know who you are. I'm very appreciative of that, but that's not a thing that I'm like, I have to have that.
But honestly, I think that that's like somewhat untrue, right? About like the famous part, because realistically, like all of the archery stuff aside, if that's a stepping stone to that, people are like, that's Brandon McDonald. He's the guy that gives all the stuff back to the veterans, and he helped my uncle, or he helped. I mean, that would be the ultimate, right? I mean,
I
that
gue-
would be
I guess
that
it's
would
true.
that,
Yeah.
that would be like the legacy piece. You know what I mean? And that would be making an impact. And so if that's what it all ends up being for, then
I guess
Then
that's
great,
true. That
right?
I probably should stop saying that, like, because I guess there is a certain amount of notoriety that like you can legitimately, like, if John Dudley decided that he wanted to do something that was huge, and I know he does stuff with Black Rifle, but like if he wanted to drive a force in the archery community, nobody could drive it like John. And it's because he had a YouTube channel that everybody watched, and he gave back and gave back and gave back, and all the free content that dude put out for years that made so many of us like so much better, so much faster, again picking us up off of the trail of the journey and bringing us forward. Like, yeah, there's no doubt that fame opens doors that are good doors to have open. So I guess you're right. There is a certain amount of notoriety that would be valuable. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because this is just a means, and you know, the end isn't YouTube star Brandon McDonald. Like
Right.
the end is philanthropist Brandon McDonald, right? You
Right.
know, when they
Yeah.
when they name your local VFW after you because of all the good that you did, when they put
Right.
your
Yeah.
Adonis statue with your PSE right out in front of
They're
it.
gonna have to make it move. They're gonna have to make it a little shaky. That's what I
Right,
want in there.
right.
The first moving statue in front of the VFW. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've been on here forever. I feel like we could just continue talking, but I know you have alternative plans for the evening, so we're gonna kind of wrap
Yeah,
this
man. I
one
mean,
up.
we didn't even get into bows, but you'll have to have me back sometime. Make me
for
more
sure.
famous.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you come to Michigan, you can just, you know, stay with us. We'll do some podcasts and all of the things.
Dude, that'd be great.
But where can people follow along with like the Mere Mortal stuff, and then, you know, Brandon McDonald, and if they have questions about anything, you know, real estate, if they are trying to help out with the foundation and like what you're doing, or any of the things.
Sure. So meremortalarchery.com, and it's Mere is MERE, meremortalarchery.com. And then probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is through Instagram. Like, I actually look at the DMs on Instagram, and my Instagram is Brandon McDonald _archery. And then on YouTube, just like go into YouTube and search Brandon McDonald, and I'm the not 6'6" black NFL player. I'm the other one. So yeah, I'll come up in YouTube. YouTube is kind of my primary like focus. I like making videos, so I want to put stuff on YouTube, but I do post relatively frequently on Instagram, and then I like getting comments and messages through the, you know, direct messages on Instagram. And they did something weird to me. Like, all of a sudden I got hit with like 250 messages, but it was over the last like 2 years. So if you messaged me, you know, back then, I apologize. I didn't even see it. Like, I was getting messages from a couple of companies when I was crapping on their bows online, and I was like, oh no, they were trying to fix it, and I didn't even respond. So yeah.
Like, what an asshole.
I know. No, I feel really bad for that. That's not the goal. If you email me on the Mere Mortal site, it's going to be difficult for me to find it because there's so much, like, the orders that come in, it just fills up the whole inbox. So Instagram is definitely the best way to try to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, we definitely have to do this again.
Yeah.
Just, you know, like I said, we could talk forever. I mean, but
yeah. No, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it's a really nice like flow of conversation. I think what we should do is we should just, once all the bows come in for this year, then we'll shoot through them all, and then Dad will just be totally quiet, and then we'll just nerd out about
Right.
bows.
that's perfect.
Yeah,
Sounds
good to me. Sounds
Perfect.
good to me.
Awesome.